Thanks for downloading this podcast. It's for personal use only and must not be broadcast, reproduced, or used in any form without permission.
Tell your friends they can get their own copy wherever they get their podcasts.
The world's longest running motorsport magazine show, Midweek Motorsport. News, features, special guests, and analysis from the experts. Formula One, sports car and endurance racing, rallying, touring cars and bikes. If it has wheels and an engine, and they keep score, it's on Midweek Motorsport.
Hello everybody, just after 8 o'clock in the UK, just after 4 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time in the US, because you put your clocks forward a couple of weekends ago. We'll be springing forward this weekend, but we'll be going to Central European Daylight Time where we'll be. That's something we'll be talking about a bit later on this evening. It's Midweek Motorsport. It is Series 18, episode number 10, and after our brief break, as we had so much going on the track last week at Sebring, it's a pleasure to be able to be talking to you again for our weekly 2-hour get-together. Up in London is Tim Gray. And on a packed programme tonight, Tim, we have what?
We have all the usual features, John. Plus...
Do we?
Yes. Plus... Joe Bradley will be previewing the first European round of the Hankook 24H series for this year. That takes place at Mugello this weekend. You can hear it live on RS1 across all 3 days. Shay Adam will bring us up to date with all things American. And Nick Damon will be here with his team-by-team review of last weekend's Grand Prix. And John, when we bring Nick in, remember, you can't touch him, otherwise you'll get into trouble.
No, I've touched Nick before, and so long as I don't work on him, that's fine. There's a precedent set, surely.
Okay, if you say so.
Does it depend whether I touch him at the front or the back?
We'll have to ask Nick when he joins us a little later on. We're also going to bring back a feature that we haven't had for a while, certainly not this year, but I think we did one towards the end of last year. So looking forward to that. That'll be in the first hour as well.
Can you give us a clue?
No, it's not give us a clue.
It's not give us a clue.
That really doesn't work on the radio. See, you couldn't tell me that was a book, could you?
No, that's right. Yeah, we're going to have to work on that one. Let's have some parish notices. Hello to David Dilliant, who says, EFAs, I'm going to be in class, but I love your thoughts on the end of the Sebring 12 hours. How do you balance IMSA's rules, which prioritise keeping battles close with policing aggression? In his mind, says David, there was one driver involved in nearly all of the 50-50 racing incidents. Randy Brown's going to be listening to the podcast as well, and says, when are we going to get that GT3 Mustang that's been running today at Sebring? I can tell you all about that later on. Hello to Tom Marshallek, looking forward to the show. I think you listened to about all 47 hours of what we did last week, Tom. Thank you for chirping in. Richard P is back from his 3,511 mile round trip to Sebring. Looks like everything's gone back with its wheels on, which is good. The Ford pickup and the caravan. That's not a caravan, actually. That's a small country cottage that he's got pulling behind that. Richard, good to hear that. Great commentary, as always. He says that's very kind of you. And the home team won. Hello to Matt and Dean. AFAs tonight. A meeting about a closed road rally. Oh, I'm intrigued. And there's still time to get an entry in for the Scatter Rally next Friday, he says. Nick, that's it. That's me and you that he's talking about doing that. Have you ever done a Scatter Rally before, Joe? Bet you haven't. Hello to Dave Alcock. Hope you've recovered from the journey from Super Sebring. Have we got the soapbox cleaned, polished and reinforced for an extended address? Can't help but feel it might get some use from RC Racing on tonight's show after he calls it a debacle at the weekend. Now, bear in mind, of course, because of where it is, I never saw a moment of it. it wasn't difficult for me to stay away from it because I was so busy. But that's my little thing that in certain places I don't watch any of it, so I have no clue. I'll wait to hear what Nick says about that. Michael Hetherington, Mickey Heth, get the soapboxes ready. It'll be an action-packed show. Hello to Dak Attack, tuned in tonight to Right Turn Lover, tuning in. MotoGP starts this weekend, and we will have a live MotoGP preview straight after this show. And I mean live because we haven't had a chance to get together to get it done. So extra time, effectively, straight after this show tonight. Neil Gardner's going to be tuned in, and as he's our artist in residence, when he's listening to anything on RSL, he's always drawing something. A 1974 911
like a court
RSR
sketch artist.
Like a court sketch artist. But tonight, he's tuned in drawing a 1974 911 RSR 2.1 Turbo.
Ooh.
Because he can. How does he see into my mind? That's very good. Dave Alcock's listening in tonight. Stephen Gardner at the subway on the way home from the office. Looking forward to the podcast for the trip to the office Thursday morning. So can't pick us up is what he's saying. Hello, Stephen. That's Stephen Gardiner rather than Neil Gardner. No relations. Otter, AFAs, but got the Tiguan through its MOT. Curious what RC Racing thinks of the TV direction at the weekend in Formula 1. Kevin Payne, looking forward to listening live to remind me of the events of the weekend. Hey, there was a lot, wasn't there? There really was. Chris Suku is tuned in tonight. Mike Nick be suggesting tonight the Ferrari have to keep on turning their engines down due to the fuel gap misdemeanors for not 3 but 4 years given their performance this season. Hello to Alex Orkin. Chinese takeaway this evening. Looking forward to discussions on F1 penalties and bumper endurance racing at Sebring and perhaps driving standards in the last hour. Motor Racing UK. Hello, Michael. Listening live, shooting for Accelerate BTCC at Croft today. Thousands of photos to sort through. Suffering a bit of wind burn. Windy, even for Croft. Fell asleep with an hour to go to Saturday. I hear that there was much swearing in German. I think there was much swearing in every language, to be honest. Sarah Rigby is listening in tonight. Just got home from work, tuned in while doing stuff. Sure, you'll need to go into extra time. Well, we are putting our MotoGP preview on straight afterwards. We'll stay on and do that. Kuiper Hoffman listening live for at least a little while from Cape Town, South Africa, while visiting Mum. Hello, Kuiper. Nice to know that you're tuned in. Johnny, no AFAs listening tonight. Bit of a meh Grand Prix. I'll if that's what you say. LA Filippone, don't forget about the time change again, like I do annually. Still haven't recovered from the Sebring weekend. Next week, if you're in the US, it's back to being 3 o'clock as we spring forward this weekend in Europe and pretty much the rest of the world as well. Alex Smith listening at work. Surprised you all have voices left after the weekend. Johnny says, I love me a Nav scatter as well. Matthew Hyman, evening. Looking forward to that MotoGP preview. We might be talking about elbows, actually, because I've got a bit of an elbow injury. I might have to talk about that. Marcel Duke, good evening, everyone. Did you see that Porsche fight to the end at the NLS race? No spoiler. 80 days to Le Mans. Robert Bonza, very much looking forward to the last lap assessment of the 12 hours. There we go. All right. Hello to everyone who is listening, and if you're listening on the podcast, and thank you for downloading from the archive, at Specutainment, if you want to react through the programme, you know how it all works. Tim, shuffle your papers.
Before we do
play
that,
the jingle. Right.
You may be a new listener who's discovered us through the brand new YouTube podcasts, which we are experimenting with Midweek Motorsport by putting Series 18 of Midweek Motorsport onto YouTube podcasts, which is part of YouTube Music. It's a brand new thing, released, started this week. I just want to sort of talk about the algorithm they use to look at things that might interest you. So things that are similar to things that are similar to Midweek Motorsport, it thinks,
Yeah.
And these are all things that have come from the rest of YouTube music. So it's given us the Formula One theme by Brian Tyler. So I think pretty good start. We talked about Formula One.
Yeah, okay,
It's given...
Do we know which version of the Formula One theme it is?
The original version, yes.
All right, okay, right.
It's given us Hello by Adele.
Really?
Yes. Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd.
Right,
A Message to You, Rudy by The Specials.
Oh, excellent.
It's a great song.
Martin Haven would approve of that, definitely.
And also,
two-tone.
Ohne dich schlaf ich heute Nacht nicht ein by Münchner Freiheit.
So something about one night will you come and sleep with me?
Without
Is
You,
that what that
it's
meant?
called, basically.
Okay.
All the latest motorsport news from around the world. Midweek Motorsport.
Did you say that was Freiheit, by the way?
Münchner Freiheit, yes. Known in the UK as Freiheit, yes.
So they had that sort of really soft thing called Keeping the Dream Alive?
Yes.
That was their one-hit wonder?
It was their one hit in the UK, but in Germany, hundreds of hits. Album after album, yes. And a lot of people think of Keeping the Dream Alive as being a Christmas song, but it isn't really. It's just a little bit wintry. It's got sleigh bells.
Like Eurovision, actually. Anyway, you've shuffled, you've
They
played.
did perform it in both languages as well.
Oh, did they?
I have both versions. I might dig them out sometime.
You know far too much about that than is really necessary. It's a bit like me with Porsche tractors. Anyway, you've shuffled, you've played. What's the top story tonight?
We're going to start with WRC, and obviously that's not a subject where we'll be inviting the thoughts of Nick Damon, as he doesn't enjoy WRC.
I can hear him sniffing already down the line, don't worry.
Joe Bradley, on the other hand, certainly strikes me as a man who stood at the side of the road in a cold, damp forest with nothing but a...
Only once, when I dragged him.
Nothing but a thermos and a foil-wrapped Scotch egg for company. It's nothing to do with watching rallying. It's just what he does on a Tuesday afternoon.
Many times.
We had a Scotch egg tonight, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah.
I've chased many an RAC rally.
Do you remember the first time that I took you up and we went to...
That was the Lindisfarne rally.
It
was the debut event for the 6R4 Metro.
And?
Tony Pond driving it.
And
I took off my epaulets and mingled with the crowd.
And there was another debut there. It was the RS200. They were both
they were both debuting at the same time.
They were running as course cars. They weren't running in competition. And we were at a stage of rival.
We were marshals.
At the bottom of Shepherd Shield.
Yep, we were marshals.
It was magnificent.
My first and last time at being a rally marshal.
Yeah. And isn't that the time that we also went to Albemarle Barracks to see them through there? Yes, and it was pouring rain. I had my Sunbeam TI. That was a car. That was the perfect car for chasing rallies.
It was. I mean, it had rally heritage, didn't it?
It did. Absolutely. Anyway, so WRC the weekend was in Mexico.
It was, and a superb victory for Toyota Gazoo Racing with a double podium finish as Sebastian Ogier took his 7th win on the Rally Mexico.
Which takes him ahead of Sebastian Ogier.
No, that is Sebastian Ogier. You mean Sebastian Loeb.
Sebastian Loeb. Sorry.
It is a new record for wins in Mexico. It's the first time the WRC's been to Mexico since 2020. And therefore the first time with the Rally 1 cars. But
there was some discussion about whether the extreme heat would negate the advantage that they thought the hybrids would have in the altitude. Because obviously the engines don't like working in the altitude because the air's thinner. Although being turbocharged, that is slightly mitigated. But it seemed that it didn't, and that I think most people were pretty happy at the reliability and the sturdiness. That wasn't the word I was looking for, but the
robustness.
Robustness, Joe. Very good word.
Is robustness even a word? I know robust is.
Have you said it twice?
I have.
If you've said it twice on the radio or used it once in Twitter, it's a word.
Okay,
that's fine.
Put it in the dictionary.
Put it in the next. And how robust the energy storage and the hybrid was. So it's a bit interesting. That was where Oitanek ended up in a lake the last time he drove for Ford, in fact. So that was that his first time back in a Ford since he ended up in the lake? It was.
Possibly, yes.
And then he was on the podium at the end in a a snorkel and mask, him and his co-driver.
Ogier actually won the last Rally Mexico 3 years ago.
Did he really?
That was before he retired, of course.
Right.
And he now appears to be someone who has retired and is leading the World Rally Championship. Now, he's only done 2 of 3 events so far. Toyota didn't get a 1-2 finish, though, because Elvin Evans was denied second place, finishing 0.4 seconds behind Thierry Neuville. Kalle Rovanperä was 4th, though. And Danny Sordo 5th, Gus Greensmith 6th, Emil Lindholm 7th, Oliver Solberg 8th, Ert Tanak 9th. And the next rally is in Croatia on April the 23rd.
Brilliant. It is a great rally. I loved that is one thing that I've caught up with. I haven't seen the last day's highlights yet, but the starting stages went under the city. They used the tunnels under the city.
Wow.
It was fantastic. I mean, There were only little, Mickey Mouse stages, just a couple of 3Ks. But the onboard cameras were absolutely... It was in the dark, big crowds, all the way around roundabout a couple of times, all that sort of stuff, getting the cars sideways. Huge crowds up in the mountains, and it was Lima, wasn't it, that it started? And it was a hub and spoke rally rather than moving around. It was a single thing.
Kept coming back.
So they had to keep driving out through Lima traffic in the morning, which was quite interesting. But it looked good.
You'll like day 3 when you finally get to watch it, because you've got a 35.5 kilometre stage.
Do you know, it saddens me that that's considered a long stage now.
Yeah, I know. It used to be 35 miles.
Miles, yeah, absolutely. And people didn't have an overnight rest.
Through the night.
Drove through the night into the next morning. The responsible adult says the Oxford English Dictionary confirms, Joe Bradley, that robustness is indeed a word.
Joe Bradley in extended vocabulary.
Can we have a check on robustia and robustiest?
Robustia sounds wrong.
Robustia is something else, and robustius is something else entirely.
I think I know her.
Moving on.
Let's do this next.
Now, for those that don't know, for those that don't know, that for a very, very long time was, particularly if you've just started listening to the podcasts on YouTube podcasts, that used to be the theme music for the BBC's film review programme, which was called Film and Then the Year. So it would have been Film 2023 now, and
or just 23.
Yes, 23, that's right, you're right. It was just 23, you're right. And for the longest time was hosted by a chap called Barry Norman, who was a renowned film critic and whose father had produced films. And it used to be, for me, required viewing. It was normally after...
It was an early IMDb, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. And it was normally around about 10 o'clock on a weekday night.
It was a show you never missed.
Yeah, absolutely. It was appointment of view television.
Yeah.
So, there's a bit of film news coming here, Tim. What film would you like to direct our attention to?
I'd like to direct you to the film that was premiered in London last Tuesday, Villeneuve and Peroni.
Oh, I haven't seen it yet.
Oh, you need to see it.
Well, I haven't
Joe.
had a chance, Tim, and I'm going to wait until we get back from the weekend.
Do you not want to watch it after the show?
We could do, although no, because you're not finished until 11, and I'll be asleep by then, mate.
It's only 2 hours.
No, exactly. After last weekend, I need to go to sleep now. I could close my eyes and go to sleep right now. No, I'm gonna. It's a lie on the sofa, and no distractions, and watch that. I've been looking forward so much to that.
Nick Damon, have you seen it?
No, But I do know Andrew Marriott was heavily involved.
Yeah,
in
he
it.
was.
He's an executive
lot of the
producer
archive.
again, yes.
Yeah.
So much like I'm sure the others, it's sitting on my planner, waiting for 2 hours of complete quiet to watch it.
It's
Excellent.
already
Which is hard to find.
It's already on Sky Docos,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah, I've already downloaded.
Yeah, I think I have as well. I think it's on my planner. On Sky Docos, then. Sorry, this is a UK channel, Sky Documentaries, which has had a lot of motor racing content actually in the last 6 to 8 months. Some of it well known, some of it a little bit more obscure. Does it have brakes in it, or
It does, yes.
It has brakes in it.
But not very often. I think there's 3 breaks in the 2 hours.
If you download if you download it, you tend to get a version where all it has is the title card either side with no adverts in between.
Go straight back in.
Oh, really? Okay. Good.
Anyway, I watched it with Johnny Palmer last week, and
Did you?
we very much enjoyed it.
Right.
I mean, we all know the story. There's nothing. We're not going to. There's no spoilers here. We know what happened.
Some people might not, so
Get
don't
out
spoil
of
it.
town. Where have you been?
Don't spoil it.
What, new to motor racing? You mean, people?
Yes.
Yes, I suppose.
So they just
I learned
Well, it's
things
not
by
a
watching
movie.
it.
It's a story of a real story. Did you? What did you learn, Tim?
I
No, you can't
learned.
say that.
Because
that'd be a spoiler.
that's interesting to hear that.
Yeah, yeah.
I learned the names of Didier Pirona's twin sons.
Ah, we already knew that.
And I also
Did you
didn't
know
realise
where-
they were twins. I thought they were just brothers, but there you go.
And where one of them worked for quite a while.
I didn't learn
He was,
that.
he was a Mercedes
AMG.
engineer.
Mercedes
Yeah.
AMG.
F1.
Yeah.
F1 Mercedes.
Yes, I knew that.
It's
I didn't know
it's
was he Mercedes or was he the engines?
Didier Villeneuve. Sorry,
Didier Pironi and Gilles Pironi.
Right, I think it's Gilles Pironi who is
Did
the
he not
engineer.
work for the engines people?
I'm not
Rather
sure
than-
exactly what his role was, but he's moved on to a sports car program.
But Shay says she doesn't know the story. That's in your
Shay doesn't
family.
know the story.
That's akin to
It was
child
before
abuse.
she was born.
Yeah, well, yes.
Doesn't matter.
So was World War II, but I bet she knows about that.
Fangio's World Championships were before I was born.
Yes, exactly. Exactly so. Exactly so. By the way, the responsible adult chipping in from the office says Barry Norman's film shows was her favourite
Yeah.
TV show.
Yeah.
Didn't like his pickled onions, though. He branched out
Sorry.
into branded
Did
food
he? What?
goods.
You mean
What?
Barry Norman's personal pickled onions?
Surely that
On
was
the
Paul
pickle-
Newman.
No, it was Barry Norman. He had a
Did
for
he
a while.
really?
He had a up until relatively recently.
So did he grow the onions or just pickle them?
I presume it was just his pickling
Pickled
recipe.
someone
Yeah.
else's. Right.
Yeah.
Never tried them.
Staying on the
Didn't
silver
quite
screen,
as crunchy as I liked. All right, on the silver screen.
Netflix yesterday revealed the identity of the first cast member of their new series, Senna.
Yeah.
This is a
Sorry.
6-part drama
Yes.
following the life and career of Ayrton Senna.
Really?
Oh, really? Not Dave Senna from Hartlepool.
No, not Dave.
Oh, see, that's a story that needs to be told. The
Ayrton
original
will be
Senna.
played. Ayrton will be played by 29-year-old Gabriel Leone, who is well known throughout Latin America.
You started laughing because Barry Norman's pickled onions just popped up on the Skype chat, didn't it?
No, because I remember what I took out of that sentence because I thought it wasn't relevant.
Oh, okay.
He started
I've heard
his career doing telenovelas.
Right, I've heard
Is it Spanish language then, or Portuguese language?
It will be filmed in both Portuguese and English.
Oh, it's so annoying. They had a program on recently. I can't remember. It was about a ship, a ghost ship type thing, and they had a multinational cast, and every single one was speaking their own language.
Without
and then
subtitles?
subdubbed or subtitled. It was like, oh, good grief! Well, just make your mind up, one or the other.
there was a crime drama that started off on S4C, where they were filling them scene for scene in English and Welsh.
All right.
So
Leone said it's a huge responsibility and also a great honour to be able to represent an icon who inspired so many people throughout his life, showing the world Brazilian sporting talent. Knowing that we'll bring this story to millions of people in so many countries inspires me to see this as one of the great roles of my career. It's
And
not
the reason
his,
that
it's not his
there
only
is-
motor racing
right.
acting role, though, is it?
Well, I was going to say the reason that it was announced when it was because it would have been
His birthday,
Senna's
yes.
birthday.
62nd
Yes.
birthday.
It would have been 60.
Did he play Speed McTavish in his telenovela?
63.
You know,
No,
63.
three girls in every racetrack.
He's also starring in this year's Ferrari film as Alfonso Antonio Vicente Eduardo Angel Blas Francisco de Borja Cabeza de Vaca y Leighton, the Marquis of Portago.
As you do.
Okay.
I've heard from people involved in the Netflix production, or maybe it was that one. So in one of the productions he's been involved in, that he's a really nice chap. Marino Franchitti was advising, and I don't know on which.
I think that's on the Ferrari film.
I think it might have been as well, yes.
Do you know who else is in the Ferrari film?
Mr. Ferrari?
Enzo Ferrari is played by Adam Driver.
Mm.
Oh, really?
I did know that, yes.
Laura Ferrari is played by Penelope Cruz.
Ooh.
Well, you'll watch that then, Joe, just for that.
Absolutely.
Peter Collins is played by Jack O'Connell.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Jack O'Connell, 1971.
Piero Taruffi is played by Patrick Dempsey.
Is he?
Really?
Oh, yes, with grey hair. With greying hair.
Taruffi and Peter Collins. Okay. So are they basing this Ferrari movie
Over a period of time.
in the 50s? Or are they going,
I think it's going to be 50s and 60s.
Right.
Has any of you, while we're talking about movies, we didn't talk about it at the time, have anybody seen the Lamborghini movie?
No.
No.
I wouldn't bother.
It's bad, is it?
Yeah.
Is that a drama? Or is it a documentary?
Let's see how far you can get into it. See if you can get further into it than I got into Rush, which was 8 minutes.
Will I get further into it than I got into the Ford and Ferrari movie?
Ford versus Ferrari.
Whatever it was.
Le Mans 66.
Yeah.
Mm. I came in partway through that movie because it was on, and I don't know why I came in partway through it, and I actually quite enjoyed it a bit more than I thought I would have.
Well, the thing,
but I know.
You know what I'm going to say.
Yeah, so let's move on.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Should we do some Sports Sky news?
Yes, we can.
We'll just dip into a bit of it here and we'll do some more later.
Shall we start with the Nürburgring?
No.
Congratulations to Marcel Duch and his team.
We're going to start at Le Mans 24 Hours. In fact, we're going to do 3 stories about the Le Mans 24 Hours here.
Right, let's get out of crystal balls. What's tittering at the back there?
Tickets this year may be as rare as hen's teeth, but it's a different part of the animal that could get you to Le Sarthe.
Oh, dear. Eggs?
As tickets are being given away by renowned Riette manufacturer Bordeaux Chanel.
Roulette.
Renowned what producer?
Roulette.
Riette.
Roulette is how they say it in Le Sarthe.
Is it kind of like the Willy Wonka?
No.
Le Mans, so like a golden ticket inside your egg.
Well, you see,
you've got to scan a QR code on the box.
Here's an interesting thing. Roulette du Mans, which is the famous Sarthoise version of this French artisanal pâté, effectively, is what it is. Doesn't have chicken in it at all. It's pork.
It's pork. You can do it with pork or chicken, but it's the chicken
pork
variety
rabbit,
that you're getting the
duck as well.
I have seen duck roulettes.
Yes,
I'm sure I've had duck roulette.
But Sarthoise,
would
there's
be
a
pork.
shop in Le Mans, and they do pork and rabbit, and oh my god,
pork and rabbit.
Oh, mate, I bring tubs of it home.
Hello.
Yeah.
And eat it immediately.
Well, you have to.
I've never had it here before.
Otherwise it would go off, wouldn't it?
Of course.
Of course.
Available in all good supermarché and some bad ones. One man who doesn't need to rely on cold confit meat for his trip to Le Mans is Dries Van Toor, who's been confirmed to the 3rd driver at Racing Team Turkey.
Well, I was going to say he's found up with another bird because he's with the turkeys.
Hey.
But how did you not link that, Tim? I'm very disappointed that you didn't link that together.
Call the whole section Poultry Corner if you want.
Yes, Le Mans Poultry Corner.
That's good, Joe. I'll write that one down.
Yeah.
We're tired too.
Alongside Sally Yollich and Tom Gamble. In the seat that would normally be filled by Louis Delatraz, who can't drive that car because he's already racing for WRT.
Correct.
Which is where Dries Van Toor raced last year.
He's spreading himself out, Louis Delatraz, isn't he?
Well, wasn't he our young driver or driver of the year last year? I think
Was he?
he was. Yeah, he got one of the listener awards, and rightly so, because he has done everything right to put himself where he needs to be to get good drives.
What was he in at the weekend? So was he in a United Autosport car? No, he wasn't, was he? And then he was obviously in the Wayne Taylor Racing with Andretti Autosport car.
Yes,
correct. My mind's gone. What was he in for the WEC? Would he have been in a WRT car, of course?
It was.
Shay says yes.
It was her nom for the driver, and she was absolutely right for driver of the year. And he's just put himself brilliantly in the right place. He is doing World Endurance Championship and European Le Mans Series for Prema Orlen.
Right. So he's doing it with Prema and then Le Mans with WRT.
Yeah, hang on, that might not have been updated.
No, it's not.
No.
It's WRT for WEC and Wayne Taylor for IMSA.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Wayne Taylor, Acura. Yes.
Moving on, because we have another driver filling a seat that can't be driven by the person who should be driving it. This is Marco Sorensen, who's going to be at GMB Motorsport alongside Jens Moller and Gustav Birch. The team principal of GMB Motorsport, Henrik Lundgaard, said, "It's not every day you get the opportunity to sign a defending Le Mans champion."
True.
That's absolutely true. That's the seat that would be filled normally by Nicky Thiem, but he's going to be with Northwest AMR.
You get like for like there. There's nothing between those two guys, Sorensen and Nicky Thiem.
And both from the same area of the world as well.
Yeah, I mean, they're both...
And this is a very Danish team.
Yeah.
Sorensen was the better goalkeeper, I always thought.
Not seen Nicky Thiem play football.
No.
Yeah.
No. Sorensen would make a good goalkeeper. He's quite tall.
And he's related to Thomas Sorensen, who used to play for us.
You're just making that up, aren't you?
Yes, that's right. But if you say it,
with authority like you are in at this moment on the...
Exactly.
I mean, he probably is
moving on.
distantly related.
Well, like we all are to
Well,
Vikings.
I was
I'm
gonna-
distantly related.
Nicky Thiem
I'm
always
from the
says
northeast.
that to me. So does Tom Christensen. Oh yes, you'll have some Viking blood out. Yeah,
Yes.
all our lads coming over
Yes, yeah.
for a wild weekend
I've been to Holy Island. I saw where they
on the
landed.
longboat.
Yeah.
Come on, move on.
Nick Damon, hello.
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 It's time to talk about Formula One.
With our Formula One correspondent, Nick Damon.
Yeah.
So I can bail out of this thing, can't I?
Only
In fact,
for
me and you can bail out of this because we
only
have...
for-
Are we doing news?
I'm going to
This
listen
is
because I'll
news
probably
or
nod
something
off.
by
news, yes.
Oh, this is some
This is
news.
news.
Don't
All
go
right,
too
that's
far. 'Cause
fine.
There's not a lot of it.
Okay.
Porsche.
Really?
Yes.
Yes. Given up. There's a
Porsche have
surprise.
given up. They've decided.
How is this
that-
a story? We've known this for ages.
Well, no. After they failed to buy Red Bull, they were looking for other opportunities to get involved in Formula One, and they
like
haven't
McLaren.
found one.
No, because they aren't prepared to pay enough money and they want to have too much control. And everyone is sitting there thinking, I don't think right now is a good time to sell.
Also, they probably asked Audi about McLaren, and they said, "Well, they would have sold us the Formula One team, but they want us to take the car company as well, and we didn't want to go anywhere near that." They've also apparently asked Audi if they could just borrow their engines, if it couldn't be too much problem. If they could just push a few down the road to Weissach.
Across the car park.
Yeah, no, it's a canny way. To 20 miles or so down the road, down to Weissach. Actually, it's further now from Audi's motorsports book because they moved out, didn't they, to Neustadt. Yeah. And Audi haven't got back to them.
They just ignored the email.
Yes, it's gone missing in the VAG system.
They're a bit
Might be in the
busy,
spam folder.
It'll be in the spam folder. Everything from Porsche Motorsport
Spammed.
straight into the junk.
On a serious point, though, I think as John says, when they absolutely loused up their attempt to take over Red Bull, timing is everything. I'm sure if Dieter had died prior to that, it may well have gone through.
Yeah. you're right.
Once they loused that up, they got themselves stuck in a corner. And my feeling is that Audi have pulled off an absolute blinder, because by the time they get the team, what they've paid for it will seem like peanuts.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think Porsche going it half-cocked, because if Porsche had any sense, they just would have bought Williams, who are for sale and are cheap and have a reasonable amount of infrastructure that can be improved. So
could we swap a Porsche for Williams? Do you think?
No, not quite that bad. Two Porsches possibly. Okay. But yeah, the thing is, they've said they're going to concentrate on sports cars and Formula E, which is very good news for Formula E, because they were odds on to pull out, and obviously now they won't.
Yeah.
The FIA has launched the tender process for manufacturers that wish to bid for Formula One's 2025 to 2027 or maybe 2028 tyre contract. The 3-year contract with an option extending into 2028. The winning manufacturer will also supply tyres to Formula 3 and Formula 2.
Well, the problem is that other manufacturers may want to take this up, and I can think of one beginning with Hang and finishing with Coup could be quite chuffed. But it's basically a closed shop. They have to offer it, but it'll go to Pirelli again. They probably want to do it.
Why?
Because it's non-controversial, safe pair of hands, all that sort of thing. And I think it's wrong. It's
a bidding process. Do we?
No, it's not like a local authority bidding process, John, where you have to actually follow any sort of rules.
It's across a regulation change, so they could be manipulating a scapegoat.
No, the FIA says the targets and specifications of the future tyre supply contract will be very similar to the current contract, and bidding suppliers will be required to demonstrate the increased environmental sustainability of their product throughout its life cycle.
How many tennis courts can you make?
If you're going to demonstrate increased environmental sustainability, how about only change them every 25,000 miles like you would on a road car?
Yeah. How about this, though? One of the reasons that Michelin decided not to properly go all in for it last time was it was in between two tyre sizes, and they didn't want to have to build the 13-inch tyres for a single year. So, presuming that they're all going to be 18-inch tyres across the life of this, that might bring other people in who have experience of that size of tyre, and that would bring in people like Michelin again, like Hankook again.
There is an issue there, though, because I think Michelin aren't very good at designing rubbish tyres.
I'd like to see Goodyear back, just for nostalgic reasons.
See, this is the point. I want to see a tyre war, unlimited spending, unlimited testing, but I don't get any of those things.
No, you're not going to get that these days, mate.
No. Who else might you get?
Kumo.
Or just Kumo?
Hankook would be. Hankook. Don't forget. Hankook have scraped one big franchise away, because they now got their first year of them doing Formula E, isn't it? They got that from Michelin.
Oh, yeah, yes. And didn't they used to have DTM, but they haven't. But have I seen that they've just got TCR World Series?
No, it's Kumo who's got that.
It's Kumo that got World Tour, was it?
Yes. Obviously, Hankook do have the Creventic series.
Yes. The TCR, I think they're going to put Kumo in all of the regional ones eventually as well. When
I can get
Fred
Henderson on the phone if you want. Coldway remolds. I mean, that's got to be ecologically sound, hasn't it?
I ran those for years.
I rallied on those.
When I couldn't get the tread pattern of tyres that I wanted, he could still give me the old tread patterns because he had the molds.
Still around you.
Hand carved them.
I don't think it was like that. I tell you what, they were the only remoulded tyres that were ever, as far as I'm aware, were ever UK Motorsport approved.
They were. They absolutely were.
He did proper mud and snow tyres. He did semi-slicks. Not slicks. Famously, of course, he made me, I think, about 10 sets of karting tyres, go-karting tyres.
Did he?
With ice studs in them, so we could do the ice racing on the indoor ice rink.
Fred Henderson do that?
Fred Henderson made those.
Right.
I said, would it be possible? And he said, yeah, of course it would be.
Wow.
So he did studded kart tyres for me.
Yeah, the ice rink was never the same, though, was it?
It was good fun, that. It was hilarious fun.
Can't play hockey on it anymore.
No.
Well, that's you just put water over the top of it, and Zamboni did.
It's good for polo.
It's great. Moving on.
We'll have some more Formula 1 in the second hour with Nick Damon's team-by-team review.
Hooray.
But now we're going to have a look forward to events this weekend because we're off to Mugello for the Hankook 12 Hours of Mugello.
Well, 3 of us are, yes, that's right.
Yes, I'm
4 of
not.
us are.
No, but 3 of the 4 of us
3
are.
of us of these 4, yes.
You're leaving me behind again.
Yes,
Well, we
there's a
have
reason.
to.
There's a reason, Tim.
We have to do that, Tim, because if we didn't, things might not happen, and we would be talking to ourselves, which we would enjoy, but I'm not sure the listener would enjoy 12 hours of silence. The 12 hours of silence of Mugello.
Yes.
Sponsored by Simon and Garfunkel.
It's not.
Perhaps the
Hello,
most-
Mugello, my old friend. I'm not sure that would
I've
get
come
the
to
audience.
race at you again.
Tim, is this working? I mean, you are the most valuable member of this team
That's right.
this weekend.
Irreplaceable.
Is it working?
Apart from Curry, obviously.
We'll have a gelato for
Kerry's got the weekend off, so.
How's she?
But she
So
could
are you
have.
on duty?
She could have worked if I'd gone to Mugello, so you know. You're basically depriving the poor woman of work.
Really?
How's she going to pay for all of those horses?
Indeed.
Good point, well made there, actually, because they're very expensive horses.
Almost
Moving
as much as racing cars.
Yes.
No, because you put a racing car in a garage, it costs you nothing. You put the horse in the stable, it still costs you money.
No, and you know of what you speak there, don't you?
Certainly
Nick?
do.
Sorry.
On both sides.
Yes, exactly.
You
Well, not
had a
racing
horse,
car,
did
but
you?
racing stuff. My daughter is horse obsessed.
Wow.
She's actually, in fairness to her, she's actually been in Zimbabwe and Botswana for the last 4 months doing
Zebras.
Horsey things.
doing horsey things, and which she's been mildly paid for as an intern. So, good on her.
Wow. That's a step up from Kerry's daughter, who's currently in Gloucester doing horsey things.
She also, it doesn't matter.
Right.
Tell us
so-
about this race then, Joe and Nick.
It's in Mugello, in the spring,
which is in Italy.
which is in Tuscany.
Yeah.
What more do you want?
What more do you need to know?
Well, it's indicative to me of what has happened or what is happening to Creventic. Creventic is going through a quite big shift, and it's happened over the last 2 seasons. It's moving very much into a GT3 and Porsche championship, and it is losing its TCE, its slower classes. There are some GT4s as well. The overall entries are up, so it's absolutely fine, but it is very much moving to a much faster event overall.
There's
So
a
I would say-
reason. There's a reason for that.
Go on. What do you think the reason is?
I know what the reason is.
Right.
The
This
TCR
is your-
spec cars
It's your opinion.
have become, well, it is my opinion, but it's based on a lot of very good, valuable information from teams and companies who are running
Involved.
TCR cars.
Yeah.
And the TCR cars have become more like bespoke racing cars. So they have apparently, and from what we've seen in the last few TCR races going back to the end of 22, less robust, less reliable in things like, just thinking about the amount of Audi transmissions and drive shafts we've seen. I use that as an example. Audi, more other manufacturers are available. And we've also had it on good authority, conversations in airports, for one, Nick, you were there.
Oh, yes.
That the cost of the parts have gone up.
Cost per kilometre has gone up.
Cost per kilometre has gone up considerably. So it's less attractive. And when you match that against the more robust 992 Porsche class,
Porsche Cup
where
car.
you've got a Porsche Cup car, which is, bulletproof.
It's probably about 25 to 30%, maybe a little bit more to buy one. But in terms of your running costs,
And the running costs is the main thing.
but the other side of things is a TCR can run in more places than a 992 Cup car can. Because outside of 992 Cup,
Well, I think when what we're talking about here is a longer race, the 12-hour race.
if you're buying them for endurance,
If you're buying them
I said
for
this 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when we first started doing Creventic. The way into this, when we did the very first Dubai 24 hours, and I think there were 997 Cup cars then, and after 2.5 hours, the top 3 were all Cup cars because they'd gone so far into the race.
Yeah.
And it was like, that's what you run that for a whole season without looking at it.
Yeah, I'm not saying the cars aren't great. They're just not very good for long-distance racing all of a sudden.
Interesting. Very interesting. So they've become more specialised, do you think?
They have. I've been told
More specialised sprint cars.
they've become more of a bespoke. The suspension components and such like are more bespoke to a racing need.
And sprint racing in particular.
And sprint racing in particular, whereas before they were derived from the road-going version.
So here's another thing. I think that GT3 has become so ubiquitous in terms of where you can race that people want to get best value for money for their GT3 cars as well. So the best value for money is going to rate in terms of euros per time on track is Creventic. And not everybody wants to go and race against semi-works or works teams in SRO. They might jump into the Spa 24 because it's a big race and there's a class for them as gentlemen drivers and stuff like that. But they don't need to be racing every week. Whereas we'll see AM category cars with only one pro in Creventic racing.
Well,
challenging
John, there's 13 GT3s, only 3 of which are full pro. 2 are pro-am and therefore 8 are am.
The number of 992s matches that as well. There's 13 992s.
992 Cup cars are a very sophisticated race car now.
Yeah, that's a grid. 26 cars. That's a full grid, isn't it?
Yeah, without anything else.
Anything else is just icing on an already very rich cake.
You mentioned other manufacturers earlier, Joe. Of course, last year we saw a Bentley here, didn't we?
Yeah, we did, and the reason why
didn't come back after Spa.
The reason why that car didn't come back is because Bas Kooten, who was running the car for I remember
Bob Herber.
They just found that the cost of running that car was going to be astronomical.
Also had a significant shunt at Spa.
It had a bit of a shunt, which wasn't irreparable, but they just, again, the service costs.
He put it back in his collection, didn't he?
He put it back with
his several
He's
of
got
them.
a Bathurst winner.
Yeah.
And he's put the car away. I mean, I'm not sure we'll see that car again. Because Bass was really, really keen on running the season, but I think after Spa, they've kind of had a bit of a think and had a bit of a regroup and gone, right, let's have a look. Right, it's cost this amount to run it here. So project those costs forward. Right, let's have a rethink.
I tell you what, we've got some really good teams.
We have 2 Vortex.
Have we got the McLaren back that we had at Dubai?
I don't think there's a McLaren there.
It's very, very Audi-esque, this one. I think we've got 6 Audis, which is
Kessel's running a Ferrari, and you can never you can't look away from a Kessel-run Ferrari.
I don't recognise any of the drivers.
Oh, David Fuminelli you should recognise. He's the pro in it.
Who's LMDV?
I do know who that is.
Yes, we discussed this last time he turned up on an entry list.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
You've got Haas RT, not that one.
You've got Fred in that one. That'll be quick.
Fred
and they've got Stefan Perrin and Mathieu Dutré, of course.
Stefan Perrin
and Dutré are ones we're running a TCR until
they've stepped out of TCR and have decided if we're going to spend all this money on TCR, we might as well be running a GT3. And I think that's what we're seeing right there, just what we've been speaking about.
Haas RT, what's ATG for their nationality? ATG.
I'm pretty sure Haas RT are a German team.
No, they're Belgian, aren't they?
They're Belgian, are they?
I might be wrong, actually.
Chief engineer, Christian, is German.
They've got a weird flag. That's a really good point.
Haas RT.
ATG. What could ATG be?
I don't
Andorra?
What number are they?
No, I think it's...
They are number 21. I don't recognise the flag at all. That's what's...
No, I think it's an African flag. I've got a feeling there was an African driver here.
I mean, you've got...
it's not from Angola, is it? It's not on my entry list. I've obviously got an old one.
While you guys find out what that stands for, I'm going to look further down.
Antigua and Barbuda.
Ah, that's right. We did talk about that.
The Kroll family's back.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Kroll is back with his daughter Chantal, whose surname is now
disappointing,
Prince.
though, no Kenneth.
Yeah, Kenneth
not
Hire and Christian Frankenhout, of course.
Carsten Tilke can pedal, and Alex Prince can. That's Chantal's husband, isn't it?
All AMs in.
Yeah, but that'll be Land Motorsport. I've got Chris Mace and Tim Mueller. How's Tim Mueller an AM? That's
showing off.
That's great. With Tim Weininger as well. That's an old German team. That's another Audi. And these most of these Audis are Evo 2s as well, so they're the new style car. Heart of Racing are back with Ian James, Roman De Angelis, and
Heart
Greg
of Racing, underneath, peel that sticker off, and it's got by SPS.
Yes, correct.
So SPS are the team behind running, and it's going to be odd. Ian James and Roman De Angelis, who we became familiar with running in an Aston Martin at the weekend at Sebring.
Yeah, but they were
now running in a Mercedes.
But don't forget they were at Dubai as well.
Yeah,
as,
I know.
As Heart of Racing as well. And they say there could be some more Mercedes running in the future. The second land car's got Ingo and Tim Vogler, father and son team, and Dr. Johannes Kirchhoff as well.
Where's car collection disappeared to?
Good question. We've got 2 Lithuanian teams. No disrespect to them, but I hope they're not running at the front, so we don't have to mention them very often.
Well, Jutta Racing tend to run near the front, so we need to work on those.
You don't say Jutta, do you? They say it a different way. I remember asking him about that.
Yeah, I've just seen that. Joe, you luckily, called Joe, you're doing the podium.
Podium,
That's
Excellent.
Yeah.
Charles Putnam, Esplanade, and Shane Lewis back for CP Racing in their Mercedes. That's another AM. Jerome Polycond.
Yeah, I know.
That's a name
And
I haven't
Ben
heard for 20 years.
And he's an AM.
He's listed as an AM. Mauro and Benjamin Ricci.
He's aged out.
He's probably 50, yeah.
Yeah.
Have you heard of Jean-Luc Bubelec?
Bubalik.
He's a French chanteuse.
It's
he's an AM
It's an
driver
all
in the
French
car.
Mercedes team for Acondis ESP.
Accordis, isn't it?
Acodis.
Acondis.
And we still aren't out of GTs there.
I know.
The GTX is obviously the 2 Vortex.
You missed out Herbert.
Um,
Never miss out Herbert.
Yeah, I was
yes.
about to talk about Herbert with the usual lineup: Ralph Bond, Daniel Alleman, Robert, and Alfred Renauer. There is your favourite for the win. You
Well,
can
also,
never
I noticed-
deny-
I'm going to say. I
as
think
they're at
that
the
Audi
moment,
as well.
as they're at the moment, they've gone into Pro-Am rather than AM. So obviously they are looking at running the twins for more hours.
Good point. That'll give them an advantage. So
Can
they're
I
looking for
take you
overall.
back quickly to Jean-Luc Boblik?
No, there's no time. Go on.
Yes,
He's a perpetual runner-up.
Is he?
2011,
Better than me.
he was second in the Blancpain Endurance Series. 2015, he was second in the French GT Championship. 2016, he was second in the Blancpain GT Series Sprint Cup and Endurance Cup in the AM category. 2018, he was second in the French GT4 Cup. And in 2021, he was second in the GT4 European Series. So he has a history of finishing second in championships.
Yeah, pretty
happy
high
wife
level,
too.
though.
Yeah, very good. We have a third Lithuanian team, RD Signs, with the Cilial racing team with the Huracan Super Trofeo. Stefano D'Asti is in a PB Racing Lotus Exige Cup car.
That Lotus is back. I wonder what colour scheme they'll go with. Will they go for the
Well,
gold
they had this
leaf
race
look
last
or
year. They only do this race.
They've been in it several years.
Yes, I remember the
You've
first
mi-
year I was there.
You've just scrolled past the 2 potential winners of 992. Red Ant Racing returns.
Oh, yeah, yes.
Ayrton, Yannick, without their dad. Corby de Broeker, is it? Corby de Broeker sharing the car with the 2 boys.
3 semi-pros.
And then, of course, Red Camel Jordan.
The Brutus family outing with Fabian Danz.
Trussers, Paul Trusswell, will be their strategist this weekend. And they are always contenders, aren't they?
This is the 992 Cup car we're talking about.
Yeah.
Feely Motors by EB Motors. Back. HRT Performance back. Red Ant have got a second Belgian crude car as well. And I'm just looking. And the return. And Collective, help me out here. Where have Tracy Krohn and Niklas Johnson been for the last years? They are back together in the 907 with Philip Hamprecht, who normally does Nürburgring and NLS and stuff like that, who's the semi-pro, in an RPM Germany 992 Cup car.
I think we last saw those guys racing at the N24 last year.
Exactly.
Tracy Krohn, who spent a lot of time in the American Le Mans Series with Nick Johnson,
And Le Mans.
and Le Mans.
WEC.
I mean, he's ran at some pretty
Krohn
high
green.
levels. Krohn Aviation was the livery, wasn't it, with the lime green,
Yep.
bright, fluorescent. Nick Johnson, I can't remember exactly when we first met Nick, but it was probably 2 decades ago in the United States. Swedish by nationality, but I think he's an American Citizen.
This appears to be the Lithuanian Endurance Championship. We've got Porsche Baltic in there as well in the 992 AM class.
Have we got any Gelzenuses racing then?
I haven't seen them, no. Marco von Berlo and Bob Herber are together at HRT Performance. And I'm just looking at some of the names as well in some of these cars. We're going to have to get pronunciation guides for some of these Lithuanians, certainly. Robertas Kopilkas, Andreas Silmas, Rudakas Totvidas, and Paulius Zadelka. But I don't know what all the accents mean and how that changes them. Oh, there's another page. Oh, yeah.
The big entry.
It is a big entry.
39.
We've got Primus Racing with all of the Swedes.
You've just scrolled past the only TCR car in the class. That one at the bottom of the previous page. Only one TCR entered in TCR. I've got two TCX, but when you see what cars they're running...
But that's the Ligier and the BMW.
We've only got one TCR car, which goes back to where we started this conversation.
So this, I noticed that this event, the Hoffer Racing by Bonk Motorsport, have now got two 365 horsepower CS M2s.
Right, yeah.
For Martin Kroll, Michael Bunk, etc., etc. And they all sort of, there's about 6 of them spread across 2 cars, isn't there?
Yeah.
The 450 horsepower has gone into TCX to race against a Ligier GS2R. Now, a Ligier GS2R is not an endurance racing car. They normally do 45 minutes or an hour. So I'll be
Alan Furte in it.
And it's got Alan Furte in it.
Wow.
He must be well into his 60s.
Wow, he is.
Didn't he do truck racing after he...
I remember him in, would it be Formula 3000?
Yeah, 1985 to 88. Yeah. He's 67 years old now.
Yeah. Thought he was...
Go, man.
I mean... The Ligier GS2... The Ligier company were can you remember when we launched that car? We launched that car at a Creventic meeting, and yes, the car was created for a sprint series, but tube frame, tube space frame, chassis, very robust little motor in it, and they were really pushing for this car to be used in endurance type racing.
14 Le Mans outings, the last one for JMB Racing. Back in a 458 GTC in 2012, raced in that time for Sard in the MC8R Toyota, which if you saw that in 1995, you'll never forget it. Courage with Henri Pescarolo and Frank Lagos in the Porsche engine Courage in 94. Eric van der Poel and Carl Velninger for Peugeot in the 905 Evo. Sauber Mercedes with Joachim Mass and Jean-Louis Schlesser in 91, and 2 years for Silkwood Jaguar with Michael Furte, Eliso Salazar in 89, and Martin Brundle and David Leslie, God rest his soul, David Leslie, in 1990. And let's not forget that he started off in a Rondo Ford Cosworth in 1983 for Ford of France, and also raced a 956 with Didier Tees and Thierry Boutsen for Brunn.
Wow.
I mean, if you're going to do Le Mans, and all right, he's
a sports car legend, Alan Furte.
Yeah, but
he's a Formula 3000 legend as well, Joe.
He is. You're right, Tim. You're right. Yeah.
He's never had a result at Le Mans better than 8th overall and 4th in class.
He's generally been in the wrong car at the wrong time, though.
Yes, he has. Yes.
Well, 89 and 90 being in the Silkwood Jaguars was perfect.
But it broke down, didn't it?
Well, the 89 was the Sauber Mercedes year, wasn't it? And 90 was who won in 1990. Le Mans won in 1990. That would have been Jaguar, won in 1990. So he was in the car that didn't win. It didn't even finish, actually.
That's what I said, yeah.
That's right.
Earlier on, you mentioned you didn't know a lot about Haas RT. I've just picked up the Mugello programme, and there's a 4-page article about them. So when you get to the circuit, you can read all about that. There's also a lovely column by our own Joe Bradley in here. Joe, what are you talking about this week?
I am talking about the story of the relationship dynamic between Mr. Lamborghini and Mr. Ferrari.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and how the Lamborghini sports cars was derived from a disagreement. Lamborghini was a tractor builder, quite renowned tractor builder.
Some people would say that of Ferrari nowadays with some of their cars.
Well, actually, so he buys a Ferrari, very wealthy tractor builder, buys a Ferrari, and then takes it to Mr. Ferrari and tells him everything that's wrong with it. To which Mr. Ferrari orders him to get out, and he basically went away and said, "Right, I'll show you."
25 miles down the road,
and
I'll set up myself.
Lamborghini sports car was built within. Remind me, Tim, was it like 40 days or 140 days, and the first Lamborghini sports car was rolled off.
So here's a question for the collector for the second half. In terms of tractors, right, will you have a Lamborghini or a Porsche?
I would have to have a Lamborghini.
I think you know my answer.
Go ahead.
Lamborghini, he would have.
I'd have a Fergie. It's got the same engine as the Triumph.
A Massey Ferguson.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Can I ask a question of us four
I'm
here?
representing for the long stroke 4-cylinder 2.1 litre.
I think I'm pretty confident here. I am the only person here who's ever done a clutch on a tractor.
Yes.
Yes, that's true.
I've never driven a tractor.
You've never driven a tractor?
Oh,
You haven't?
No.
I've driven a tractor through a garage door before.
Closest I've got to
Not
ride
behind
on
the garage door.
It was
but through the-
closed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I nearly drove a
what sort of
Porsche through a garage door, but I won't talk about
I
that.
think it was a Massey
It'll
Ferguson.
have been a Massey Ferguson or a Ford.
I took the garage door off my dad's garage with my Triumph Dolomite.
You need some heavy lifting gear to do a clutch on a tractor.
I bet you do.
It splits into three. Because the chassis of a tractor is basically...
I just need a garden big enough so that I can justify buying a Porsche Junior.
We've got the meadow across the road.
You've never had to justify any kind of ridiculous purchase. So get it bought.
Shall we move into the second hour then? Because it's just after 9 o'clock. Midweek Motorsport Series 18, episode number 10.
Would you like to hear some of my experimental avant-garde poetry? No? Okay then. It's Midweek Motorsport. And still to come.
1 week, we are going to have some of Chris's avant-garde poetry in
Who's
this
Chris?
sport. Our voiceover man.
He's not called Chris.
What's he called?
I don't know, but it's not Chris.
All right. And strangely enough, he also does some VO for CNN in International. And he uses the word avant-garde in a promo for a programme about Africa. And every time I hear it, I giggle because I think he's going to start talking about avant-garde poetry.
I heard him doing a competition for something on local radio the other day as well.
He does a lot of heart stuff, heart radio here.
Nick tells me it's Mark, and it is
Mark.
It is Mark.
It is
yeah.
Mark. It is Mark. Thank you. All right, more of the same nonsense in hour 2. Your submissions at Specutainment, please.
Midweek Motorsport.
On RS1.
Sorry, Mark.
And that was Debbie at the end there.
And that was Debbie. Mark and Debbie, is it? Yes, that's right. We should have known that. Thank you, Nick. Well done.
Just looking at page 8 of the programme for Mugello, there's an advert on page 8.
Yeah.
Which, the photograph in the advert clearly shows Mr. Nick Damon. And I'm wondering, are you getting image rights for this?
No, he's not.
No, he's not.
He was very happy when he was...
Is this the 0221 one?
Yes.
And also as well,
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, he loves
It's not as good as when I was 25 feet high on the side of a container, but what can you do? But don't forget that program, which you can download, is of course the bastion of young Joe with his behind garage doors.
We've just been talking.
We talked about that. So, Nick, I think we can do Formula 1 team by team now.
Oh, excellent!
We're going to get a little hooray.
Why have we got a jingle?
We could probably do
That's
one.
a very good point. We'll get one.
Sung.
We could probably use a press release one for it this week. Go then.
We're going to start with Aston Martin.
Yes, we are. Well, Lance Stroll broke down.
He did.
And
why did he break down?
engine problems. The engine was playing up, but he caused a completely unnecessary safety car.
He didn't.
He didn't. Race control caused that.
Well, he caused it by breaking down, and then the safety car, apparently, despite the fact that there are cameras everywhere, couldn't see where the car was, and the GPS said it might be slightly on the track. So they didn't even go to virtual safety car, which would be the obvious thing to do first. They went straight to safety car. Now, obviously, that did help in a way, because it obviously got Max a lot closer to Checo, but I'm sure that wasn't the reason. The key thing, the interesting thing about Lance retiring is if he hadn't retired, I am pretty sure he'd have come fourth. And I'm very disappointed he didn't come fourth. For what reason, Tim?
I don't know.
Because we would have had 5 teams, 2 by 2 by 2 by 2 by 2 by 2 in the points.
I see.
And I don't remember that ever happening, and I think it's very indicative of where we are at the moment with the cars in the series. So Lance was not as quick as Fernando all weekend, but still put in a reasonable performance given the limitations that he had. In fact, he wasn't running very well. Fernando had a very eventful race, to put it mildly. He managed to park in the wrong place to begin with, and then he managed, when he parked the next time, to get touched up. And then he had to come serve another. Then he got yanked off the podium and had his trophy taken away from him, only for it to be given back a bit later. Lance made a good start. Nothing to do with being too far to the left in the box, but that gave him a 5-second penalty. He led for 2 laps until the ridiculously fast Red Bulls cruised past like they weren't even trying. He then realised that the best he could do was second or third, depending on how Max came through the field. Ran very well. When they served the 5-second penalty, they touched the jack. They tucked the jack to the back of the lifting area. Didn't move it, didn't lift it. It was just sort of interfaced with it. And that later on, by later on I mean 45 minutes later, resulted in a penalty. Was that your watch which was talking 10 seconds? To you there? My watch, was heckling me.
Excellent.
If it's not you or Joe, it's the watch. And that resulted in a penalty. And then, of course, they overturned the penalty because, interestingly, in these you can't touch the car things, and don't forget that last week or 2 weeks ago in Bahrain, Esteban Ocon's team did start working on the car at 4.8 seconds. Now, this was just a case that it was connected. The rear jackman didn't do the jacky stuff actually until after the 5 seconds, but it was connected. But Aston Martin pointed out that actually you're always allowed to connect the front jack. So there's no actual thing saying you can't connect the jacks, as long as you don't lift. And then the FIA went, oh, all right, and he gave him his 100th podium back again, and just really made themselves look stupid. Again, what's new? But there we are. So yes, Aston Martin now proving conclusively they are the second fastest team, but still they're slow compared to Red Bull.
Let's move on to Williams.
Yeah, after their kind of false dawn of looking really competitive, or more competitive you would expect in Bahrain, it was a less impressive performance. Alex Albon was struggling a little bit to get anywhere, and then retired. Logan Sargent did look good actually, but effectively wore his tyres out to the back end of the race and just faded back to nothing. Ended up 16th out of 18 finishes, and the others had major problems. So, despite the fact this should have been a track that would do well for Williams is a car that has no drag and no downforce, which is, the no drag bit was fine. This is a low downforce track. A missed opportunity, and they can't really afford to miss opportunities at the moment. But not good for Williams.
And we move on to Alfa Romeo.
We are. Alfa Romeo qualified reasonably well and thought everything's going to go great, and then it didn't. Valtteri Bottas couldn't explain a lack of pace. The car just didn't understand what it was. Ended up taking an extra stop at the end just to try and get himself in clear air and see if he could do a bit of testing mileage, but didn't go where. Zhou Guanyu, basically was moving forward and then got stuck in a DRS train, which meant he didn't move forward any further, and ended up 13th. And they were they came out of this. This was fine. We know what's wrong. We'll sort it all out. It's one off. We'll be fine next week in Australia. So they were kind of like already waving off the problems before they even started.
McLaren.
Well, McLaren obviously had a disastrous Bahrain with Piastri being the first retirement, and Lando Norris making more pit stops than a incontinent owl does on its way back around the nighttime loop. But interestingly, they managed to be even worse this time because they were trying to be competitive. Lando Norris made a very uncharacteristic mistake, which ruined his entire weekend when he hit the final corner and bent the steering arm, and that took him out of qualifying. Piastri qualified well. Yeah, good work for the Australian. I mean, usually I think I said wrong in last time's team by team. Of course, most of these F2 guys have been to Saudi Arabia. It's Australia's not been to. That'll be the first test of the rookies, tracks they've not been to before. The only person who hadn't been here before and raced here before actually was Nick de Vries. Piastri made a reasonable start. Unfortunately, he had a very minor contact with one of the Alpines. I think it was Gasly. That took his front end plate off, which then Lando Norris then ran over. So that actually damaged both the cars, and both the cars were in the pits almost immediately. At that point, they then ran quite long. Norris seemed lacking a bit of pace. In the end, he actually let Piastri past him. But I'm not sure it was a team order, just we couldn't be bothered to do anything else. And Piastri got past Sargent. So massive return of 15th and 17th for McLaren, who are obviously pinning all their hopes on their race 4 upgrade in Baku.
And next will be AlphaTauri.
AlphaTauri, not a great weekend when your team principal, Franz Tost, turns around and says, I don't trust my team anymore. And he basically said that as far as he was concerned, he doesn't trust his engineers or his mechanics because they keep telling him the car's going to be good, and it's not. And the car, it's kind of the Red Bull's playable. It's got the engine, the gearbox, the rear suspension of the Red Bull. Unfortunately, it hasn't got Adrian Newey's aerodynamics, so it's not going very well. So it just goes to show that sometimes there's no, it really isn't the engine that's doing anything. It's obviously something else entirely. De Vries himself said he didn't think he had a very good race. I think he was being a bit harsh on himself. He also got stuck in the DRS chain, but as I said, he was the person who hadn't been there before. Yuki Tsunoda looked like he was going to absolutely ace the entire event by actually scoring a point, and he was heavily fighting off Kevin Magnussen, but in the end his tyres just ran out and Magnussen got past him, so he got 11th. But I think a good performance by Tsunoda, who was under a lot of pressure at the beginning of the season, but I think he's performing very well, but hard to notice when you're so far back.
Okay.
Haas.
Well, yeah, I just thought you weren't harsh enough on Nick de Vries, but maybe it's not his fault. Haas.
He's the only person who hasn't been there before. And he himself said it wasn't a great day, but he was still, in a train where he was effectively, a couple of seconds behind Hülkenberg, who was 2 places ahead of him. And they were behind his teammate by less than 2 seconds. And that's
so
after
Haas, then?
40 laps. Yes, Nico Hülkenberg again qualified well and better than Magnussen, but in the actual race, Magnussen, through a combination of, I think, a bit more aggressive driving and a little bit of luck, was the man who managed to get the point. And there's going to be very, very few points available for Haas, AlphaTauri, Alfa Romeo, Williams, and probably McLaren that don't improve their car. That 1 point could prove it to be very, very important. Great battling. I thought it made a meal actually of getting past Tsunoda, or perhaps Tsunoda's being particularly good in defending. But the Haas car also doesn't seem to have anything special about it. And of course, most of its points from last year were scored at the start of the season. I think it's been a very, very, very long year for these lower midfield teams because they're fighting for even less scraps than they were last year. Because you've now got Aston Martin, who've firmly established themselves as they are definitely going to take 2 positions out of every of the top of the 10 scoring points if they get to the end. They will always be in the top 10. And that's 2 more spaces that don't. Basically, you've got 8 places gone already if the car's finished with those 4 teams. It looks like Alpine have got their act together better than the others, and that's 10. That's the 10 scoring places gone. They're literally scrapping around for breakdown points.
Let's move on to Alpine then.
Well, Alpine, their avowed intent was to get close as a third. That might happen if only because the third place team may score less points because it's sharing it out amongst many more teams this time. But the actual Alpine itself has dropped away from third place, and it's going to be lucky to get. Well, I'm sure almost certainly will finish 5th, unless again this McLaren upgrade is unbelievable. So yeah, I'm sure they achieved 8th and 9th, which is 1 place better than they deserve, which was 9th and 10th. Again, Ocon and Gasly incredibly evenly matched. And let's be really, really. Let's give heap praise on those 2 Frenchmen. They were right together at the restart and managed not to take each other off. So how great that, because I'm sure you've got very short odds of them crashing each other off the circuit in no time at all. But again, Alpine, it's not where they want to be. They keep resetting it there. Every now and again, they have a new 100 race rule of how they're going to start winning races and getting on the podium. And again, it's another year where they're not going to be challenging for, well, no one's going to be challenging for wins on merit, but they're not even going to be challenging for podiums on merit. So disappointing for Alpine, and they don't really seem to know where they've gone wrong.
Ferrari next.
They don't seem to know where they've gone wrong, or they won't tell us. Ferrari, who were confidently the second best car, were a little bit upset to be slightly outraced by Aston Martin in Bahrain were just off the pace all weekend. I mean, apart from the exceptional qualifying of Charles Leclerc, which was negated, of course, by his 10-place penalty, because they're already running penalties, they're already getting through pieces of engine unreliability. It appears that they have a reliability issue. They won't tell anybody what it is, and so everything's turned down quite a lot because they've got engine problems or electrical problems. But so the cars are hamstrung by a lack of power, and they've also got horrible tyre wear as well. And they had that same problem they had last year where they couldn't get the hard tyre to work either. So it appears they've managed to, much like some other teams, actually take a car and make it worse rather than improving it this year. Don't forget, there weren't a huge amount of changes between this year and last year. There was a slight raise of the throat entrance, so a slight raise of the effective ride height of the intakes of the air underneath the car. But the car's, not doing anything. So they also say they know how to fix it. It may be they've got engine problems. Who knows? But it was a pretty desperate performance by them outside of quite a good few minutes on Saturday evening.
And Haas is using that engine and not doing particularly badly with it.
Yeah, it's a good point, Tim, because then you begin to think it's an installation issue. Because there's two other teams using the engine and not having a problem. So is it an installation issue? Have they tried to package it too tightly? Have they put something where it shouldn't be? They won't tell you until it's fixed, but they may never tell you.
It may never be fixed. Let's move on to Mercedes.
Well, Mercedes, what you have to, if you actually follow the internet, I'm following the internet. If you look at the news stories, every single news story is about Lewis. Lewis changes his trousers. Lewis loses his socks. Lewis is this. Lewis is that. There is an absolute obsession with Lewis. I mean, obviously the news this weekend was that he's no longer working with his personal physiotherapist Angela Cullen. It's not. You think that's interesting?
Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
They parted way. Now,
very, very interesting.
This is what go on then, Tim. Give me your thread, because I've got a kind of a feel on it as well. So you go for it.
The press release implied that it was her decision and it was all about her wanting to explore new avenues. And then I think it was Ted Kravitz did an interview with Toto Wolff, who said whatever Lewis wants, we'll go along with.
Yeah, I think Lewis wanted to make. Now this is weird. Now this reminded me. Do you remember when Valentino Rossi sacked Jerry Burgess?
Yes.
Now, Lewis hasn't got the ability to sack Bono. So the most important person he could sack to change things, because when things aren't going well for top-line sports people and they can't work out why, they sometimes will make a knee-jerk change just to get
sack the
a
coach
refreshing.
If you're a tennis player, change your swing if you're a golfer.
100%. And I think this is nothing against Angela. I think this was the most important person in his team he could fire. Because
he pays for her.
He can't fire the Mercedes employees. It's not like because Valentino was Valentino, he could fire Jerry Burgess because he actually ran the team at that point. Yeah. And I must admit, even 8 years on, I don't think that was a very clever move by Valentino. But never mind.
I don't think that's a very clever move by Lewis.
I don't. But I think that you sit there and these guys, these sports people, are just Emma Raducanu. How many coaches has she got through since she won the US?
She's had more coaches than National Express, hasn't she?
Very good.
So can I just clarify, you guys, because you've lost me a bit. So can I just clarify that Lewis has fired her because of his lack of performance?
Yeah, it's because
she is his
it's a situation
coach.
where they sit there.
Does he know anything about aerodynamics?
No, but this is the point.
She's nothing to do with the car. She's employed by him to look after him.
Yeah,
and him alone.
But this is the point. When things are going wrong and going wrong for a long time, and you look to make changes, and you have to think, what changes can I make? What can I do? And it depends what level of control. What do I have control over? So Valentino Rossi could sack Jerry Burgess, which was a major thing. That's not. So Lewis has effectively, I think, made a change for change's sake to try and change things up.
Whether or not it's the right decision.
There is no by the way, I don't criticise him for doing this. It's just an observation. And everyone else is criticising him for anything he does. I mean, he's absolutely once again getting crucified for everything he does. And I just don't understand why. And George Russell has had a much better weekend than this weekend. And we noticed the start of last year, we had the same thing with George.
Has he replaced Angela with anybody?
Not that I know of, no.
That's going to be really interesting because nobody in the Mercedes-AMG Petronas team has had to look after Lewis since she's been on board, which is 4 seasons now?
7 years.
Is it that long?
7, yeah.
Right. And she does everything, from making sure he's got his hat to his watch to the right drinks bottle to what he eats, etc., etc. She also ensures that everything's ready for him to get in the car, to get out of the car, everything, literally everything. She's walking alongside him. Now, nobody in the Mercedes-AMG Petronas team's done that, or been tasked to do with that. So this is very interesting. Quite aside from her, this is aside from her duties as, the performance coach. So, whatever other mental and psychological exercises she's putting him through, physio, stroke, body coaching, etc. That's very interesting. Because I never saw any of it at the weekend.
I thought it was more interesting than it was given credit for. I think he's scrapping around a bit at the moment.
No, I think it's interesting going forward, Nick, to see who fills that gap and how it's filled. Because she's doing about 4 people's jobs and doing them very, very well. And she basically, I credit her, and we've said this on this show before, we've had long chats about this, and funny enough, the responsible adult and I have had long chats about this on road trips and aeroplanes going all over the place. We both credit her with the change in attitude and the change in mental robustness that Lewis has had, because he hasn't had to think about any of the extraneous nonsense of which there is legion in Formula One, because she's dealt with it all. She's filtered out all of the noise. And therefore, all he has had to do, generally speaking, I'm slightly simplifying it, but you know what I mean. He's had to get in the car and drive it. He literally hasn't.
Yeah, but he doesn't, though, does he?
But that's all he's had to do.
Yeah, but he doesn't, though.
But that's all he's had to do.
Her filtering out the noise has allowed him to go off and, getting into making political statements.
No. But that's got nothing to do with what I'm talking about. I'm talking about stuff at the racetrack, around him doing his job as a racing driver. He doesn't have to hardly interact with anybody. He doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't have to go and even pick his own drink or his own watch or worry about what shirt he's wearing that day or what hat or whatever, or where he's got to be. She has run him at the circuits for everything. So all he's got to think about is getting in that car and driving that car.
Yeah, I know, but then you kind of dehumanize. I don't want, for want of a better term, you kind of dehumanizing. I mean, if he doesn't even have to, get his own drink or choose his own shirt, then and that's left his mind capacity with lots of boredom to kind of...
No, quite the reverse. It's taken that out so he can concentrate...
As long as he does that.
Concentrate on setting the car up.
As long as he does that.
Working out what tyres he wants to be on and when he wants to change the tyres and dealing with the people he has to deal with in the team rather than the people he doesn't have to deal with with the team. And he's now going to have that as a distraction unless somebody steps in and fills exactly the void. And I'm not sure who that person will be. That's my point. Sorry, this is supposed to be team by team, and we've
hijacked it, Nick.
But anyway, so I think in another shade of last year, Mercedes' car is not very good, but they're still maximising the points they get out of it. So they got a 4th and 5th, which is as 1 place better than they should. Well, actually 4 places better, because realistically they should have been 7th and 8th. But and George is doing very well. He's not. I think George is having the advantage of not knowing what a great car feels like, so he's happy to drive a rubbish one a bit more than Lewis is. And I think he's not sitting there thinking I've only got 2 years to get another championship and thinking the year's wasted. So yeah, I think it's a difficult situation. Mercedes have made an absolute complete horlicks of this, and they're scrambling around. Unfortunately, Mercedes made a horlicks of it. Ferrari have made a horlicks of it. Alpine have made a horlicks of it. Aston Martin have done really well, but coming from too far back. And so we're left with Red Bull. I'd like to say thank you to whoever manufactures Red Bull's drive shafts. Because without Max Verstappen's drive shaft failing in qualifying, a very pointless race would have been completely pointless. because he decided on pole and won by miles. Luckily, they handicapped themselves enough so he could overtake lots of cars, and you could actually. Do you remember how rare? Do you remember in the Mercedes era? It was really rare to see how fast the cars actually were. Because they're very rare. Well, they let those cars. They let the cars off the leash for two reasons. One, because Verstappen had to come through the pack, and then they got to the front and they were racing each other, and you get to see how fast those cars are, and they are stupidly quicker than the rest of the field. Now, there is the issue, obviously, of the financial doping, which is hanging over them, and the basic fact that the teams are pulling people. But Max Verstappen is driving very well. Sergio Perez drove this particular race very well. But the team is so quick, and it's really interesting how in the second year of a set of regulations, they've completely pulled ahead. And the problem is, because we all know, despite the noise about upgrades and everything else, we've been following F1 long enough to know this is how it is for this year now. We lived through the Ferrari dominance, we lived through the early part, some of the years of the Mercedes dominance. This is how it's going to be. Red Bull will win every race unless they have a double mistake, and it's just that's how it's going to be. There is too big a gap, even for it to be pulled back. So unless they have a big problem or you get a wet race, something like that, there's no bat on that. Perez winning the second race makes it slightly interesting, but Max Verstappen is going to win this championship, probably winning 17 or 18 races. Perez will get 4 or 5. And because it's really unlikely any team will win all the race, somebody else will win one. But that's how it is. And the reason it's like that, and interestingly, if you remember my rant on the last team by team, it's now something picked up by other people in the media. It's the cost cap. It's the unintended consequences of the cost cap. And I won't go into it again, but that's what
I don't
it is.
disagree
People
with you,
can't catch up. And I'm not having a go at Red Bull, despite their overspend, because that was 2 years ago, unless they've overspent again last year. We don't know yet, because they've done a brilliant job with the world's best designer, and they've absolutely done a brilliant job. Nothing against Red Bull, but there is how can anyone catch up with all the restrictions on cash, on wind tunnel time, anything else? Because the only way you could catch up in the past was throwing money at it, and you can't do that anymore.
It also makes the penalties that they were given for overspending look as nonsense as they were, because they haven't had to do that much work, have they?
No, and one thing I would say is if you want to have an enjoyable week at the expense of other people, watch all the broadcasters panic now. Yeah. Because it's, this is the first time I've had this problem in the last few years, and... because the last couple of years, or the last year, because they're worrying that
it'll get boring and they'll lose.
Well, exactly, because 17 and 18 were good years, and even 19 was competitive. Now, 20 and 20, in 20, when the Mercedes was super competitive, was the first year of COVID, so we were really chuffed to get any racing whatsoever. 21 was a season for the ages. Last year was really, really interesting, even though it died off at the end of the season, but we're all used to that. That's not a problem. And we all hope we're going to come back this year with competitiveness, and we've not. And unfortunately, the team that's winning, if it was Ferrari who had done this, then that wouldn't be quite so bad. But the team that's winning it is, I don't think I'm saying out of place, is almost certainly the least popular team on the grid.
Well, here's what
outside of the Netherlands and Mexico.
Here's what I think will happen now. Watch the shift from major broadcasters who've been pro Red Bull in the past and whose presenters are either Red Bull ambassadors or being paid by Red Bull to do their advertising, or used to drive for Red Bull. Watch the shift to, now, is their DRS really legal? Oh, now, what else have they been doing? Is there something that we have to... Because they've got to generate some kind of controversy and some kind of reason for people tuning in. And if it isn't for the races, it'll have to be something else.
Surely, Nick, by the time the verdict on whether they'd breached the cost cap came last year, this year's car was pretty much done. So,
absolutely.
The effects of the punishment will be seen in next year's car, not this year's car.
And the effect of overspending was, the fact is that, it wasn't, I don't know what punishment you could have given them. It wouldn't have applied to this year anyway. We either applied retrospectively to last year or the year before.
I like your idea of taking, 3 times the overspend off them or whatever it was.
That didn't happen. I don't understand why that didn't happen. But it's irritating for fans of the sport. I don't think, in reality, it made any difference to this car whatsoever. Because
what you mean? what didn't make the punishment?
The overspend didn't make any difference to this car. I think they overspend.
That's not why the car is so great. Is what.
So there was no lasting advantage from the overspend from the.
Yes, there was one lasting advantage. They won the 2021 World Championship. That was a lasting advantage.
Will the reduced wind tunnel time have an effect on
not
their
anymore,
development?
because the car's so good, they haven't got to bother with it. No. They'll be able to turn this. They'll be able to stop working on this car in about 6 races' time, and then go straight to next year's car with the wind tunnel time they've got. It's unfortunately because they've been so good, that penalty will have no effect.
So by the time everyone's caught up by mid-season, towards the end of the season, they'll already be ahead for next year.
You can't catch up. This is the problem.
You can't spend the money.
There is a very, very, very good chance that this is now welded in till the end of 25.
Unless they have massive, massive issues with unreliability and parts.
Well, the Honda engine's been absolutely brilliant for the last 2 years.
Toto mentioned that we're going to see a very, very different Mercedes in the next few races. Is that after Australia we're going to see them do away with the sloping sidepod?
I've been very closely involved with this whole in and outs of F1 since 96 when I started I was working on it and then being really close to it. I have yet to see a mid-season upgrade that's changed the course of a championship.
Yeah.
I hope I'm wrong. I'd love it because I'd love to have some competition, but perhaps they can get a bit closer, but it isn't going to change the fact that what was going to happen there.
Well, let's wrap this up because we've got a lot to fit in, and we've got MotoGP following us tonight as well. So the point being is nobody could afford to do a complete redesign on their concept last year, so they can't afford to do it this year, Nick. So Mercedes aren't going to come out with a car that looks substantially different from what they've already got.
Well,
they can refine it, but they can't change it. They couldn't afford to build an extra tub last year.
Yeah, and also don't forget they're also limiting it. The engine is locked down as well now.
Correct.
Everything's locked down to save money. This is the whole point. If you're going to have a multi-chassis championship, and then you lock everything down, yes, the idea is we'll lock in. Well, you don't lock in evenness. You lock it in
the advantage.
Inequality. Yeah. Inequality is the wrong word.
No, it's absolutely the right word. You lock in the advantages and the disadvantages. So you lock in the.
This is why I am completely against the brain of the world, but this is not how F1 should be.
Nick Damon.
I would be happy to have 12 cars spending $1 billion and 20 cars mucking about 140 million.
Nick Damon and his Formula One, team by team.
Sorry, man.
No, that's absolutely fine.
There'll be another one of those after the Australian Grand Prix. Which comes next?
It does, and it's just a case of how far Max Verstappen wins by.
Moving on.
To add on to that. Ayumu Iwasa won the F2 sprint race. Teo Porcher took out Ollie Behrman in an attempt to overtake Victor Martins, a move which went spectacularly
that was a really
wrong.
Awful move.
He was given a 5-place grid penalty for the feature race, finished out of the points in 13th. Frederick Vesti won the race from Jack Doohan. Ralph Boschung now leads the standings.
And that tells you all you need to know if Ralph Boschung's leading the standings.
Yes, because Boschung's been in the news for very different reason this week, because it's emerged that his team Campos has been fined €5,000 after a sponsor took a selfie with the safety car during the feature race at Bahrain.
Okay.
And apparently where he was standing, it meant that the safety car driver couldn't see anything in his wing mirrors, which is kind of important for safety.
Yes, I shouldn't laugh.
Adrian Campos said, this is Adrian Campos Jr., of course, said, these people have never been at a racetrack. They need to be taught how to behave during a race.
Yeah, but we took loads of money out of them to get on the grid.
Extreme,
pretty much, yes, because Ralph Boschung wouldn't be racing without these people at all.
And I'm sure the safety car was not deployed at the time, but parked up ready. So the information he's taking from those said mirrors is irrelevant. He's going to be radioed before he's allowed to deploy.
He's past echelon style, so what he's seeing is the pit
yeah.
He's seeing the cars.
Yes.
Remember, this is the race with the pit stops, the feature race.
Yeah. So he's seeing the cars coming in through the pit lane.
And then coming out beside him. Yeah.
All right.
We say hello to... oh, no, before we do that, I've got to talk about what's on the Simcast tomorrow night.
Oh, yeah. It's Team GB this week,
It is, again. Last week...
2 in a row.
If you listened to last week's show, you'll have heard Matt and Stephen talking about some outlandish sim rigs. Mm-hmm. And this week, Stephen may have found a new winner in their continuing quest to find the most outlandish sim rig. Plus, they have some announcements from Assetto Corsa, World of Outlaws, and Lego. That's all on the Simcast tomorrow night at 8 here on RS1. And now we can say hello, Shay Adam.
Hello. I like Lego.
We all like
Lego,
Lego.
don't you?
Can we make Shay a bit louder, please?
program
What a bizarre comment.
I had to.
He mentioned Lego.
She's 8.
I know.
Remember, everybody.
No,
she is 8.
She does all the Lego Technic stuff, don't you? Shay?
Yeah.
got
Yeah, I've got my F1 car, thank you, Carol, and my Porsche that are currently in storage right now.
Did you
Very
have to-
delicately.
Did you have to deconstruct them before they went into storage, or do you one
Oh,
of these people
good
that puts
grief, no.
a little bit,
No,
little bit of glue on each of the ones before you put them together?
No. They're each in their own box with nothing on top of the box, and they are nicely padded with other bits and memories of racing all around them to keep them safe. I packed thoroughly.
Is that the ones that used to be in your glass cabinet?
Yes, both of them.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
Porsche Technic and
I've seen them.
Williams F1 car.
She's our geek.
You've seen them,
everybody.
Joe?
Yeah, I have.
Our
Shit.
geek.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've only got 25 minutes left because we've got MotoGP coming,
Which
and we've got
means-
to talk about on the grid as well this week.
We'll talk about that later.
right.
But what happened
Where do you want to start?
yesterday, Shay, that hasn't happened since 1996?
I know.
Okay, John, go.
I think. Is this sports car related, Tim?
No.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Oh, it's the NASCAR story then.
I was going to say Ford at Sebring.
No, that's
Ford
sports.
and Chevy on track at the same time.
No.
because that happened.
It
never
is the
mind.
NASCAR
That was-
thing, John.
So this is the guy who was told to in
No,
the
it's not that.
Xfinity race. No.
No.
All right, okay.
Although I
Alright.
did want to talk about that.
Right. Yeah. Okay. We give up.
This was a NASCAR Cup Series car at North Wilkesboro.
North
Oh,
Wilkesboro.
North Wilkesboro. I saw
did
the
know
video.
that.
I did see the video of that.
Tyler Reddick was the first one out. Austin Dillon, he was in the Toyota. Austin Dillon in the Chevy and Chris Boucher in the Ford. And they're just
That's
doing some
pretty cool.
tyre testing at the moment. But North Wilkesboro is holding the All-Star race on May the 21st. So we will get to see...
Is it?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That is cool. I bet you've raced that on iRacing, haven't you?
Yes. I
North
have.
Wilkesboro.
Yes, I've had a try.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
very tight. Very tight.
Very tight.
Is it a 9-second lap or something ridiculous like that?
One little miscue into turn 1 or turn 3, you lose a second sliding up out of the groove and lose control of your car, said Reddick. And that's with no traffic and no mistakes. So maybe with more traffic, the fall-off will be more. But we're out of control from lap 10 on.
That's the tyre deck, isn't he? He's talking about
Yeah,
there.
Austin Dillon said it reminds me of a dirt car on a really slick dirt track.
That might be worth watching.
He would know.
It's because the surface is so warm. It's worn. Excuse me.
Have they not resurfaced it? No.
I think they have. But it's been pretty cold there as well, hasn't it?
Yeah, winter's lingering. Although in Florida, it wasn't winter at all. It felt like summer.
So where is North Wilkesboro shit?
North of Charlotte, isn't it?
It
All
is,
right,
yeah.
So it's not up in the...
It's a 0.62 mile
Wow.
surface, and it's not been resurfaced since since the Cup last race there, 1996. So the circuit and the asphalt is the same as it was in 1996. I don't know when it was resurfaced before then, but there you go. So 0.625 of a mile, it's going to be... There you go, that was a lap.
It's 27 years ago.
Yeah.
It's about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours from VIR.
I like the idea that they're out of control from lap 10.
And you mentioned Josh Williams, John.
Yes. This was a bit of a bizarre one, wasn't it? Was that Xfinity?
Yes.
Yeah. I wasn't very much across this, but I saw it coming up on the Twitter when we were working at the weekend. And basically, he went out there, his car needed repair, and they taped it up, but the tape didn't stay on, so he was told to park it, so he parked it.
He did.
He parked it on the front straight on the start.
What?
Oh, too much, Shay. Turn it down slightly.
No.
Sorry, let me butch that up a bit. What?
I think this is, what was his name? Josh
Williams.
Williams, I think he said.
Yeah.
He got out of the car on the racetrack.
Yes.
Oh my goodness!
I walked across the grass and then walked across the pit lane and jumped over the wall and got in a golf buggy.
Well, that's one way to throw a
presumably then
tantrum.
went to the NASCAR officials for a little chat.
He has been suspended for a week, although his car will still be racing at COTA, Circuit of the Americas, this weekend.
Well, it was
Yes.
petulance rather than ignorance then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He'd had a he'd had a little shunt earlier on, and they put some race tape on it, and it fell off and onto the track and caused a caution flag. NASCAR told him his team was disqualified for the rest of the event and to park the car, and so he did. And
Oh my gosh!
yeah, they said they were going to fine him, and they said, what are you going to do? Fine me? I can't afford to pay it. And somebody said, I can't remember, I think it was Denny Hamlin. It was Denny Hamlin tweeted he would pay any fine that he might get. So
I was just going to say there must be someone out there who's volunteering to pay his fine.
yeah.
Why? So what's the connection with Denny Hamlin and why would he pay his fine?
Nothing at all.
None.
He just felt
Feel
that
sorry
he'd
for him.
been treated badly.
Right, I see.
Yeah.
What have Bristol tweeted this week to in a sort of show of solidarity?
Bristol City or Bristol Rovers would that be, Tim?
Bristol Motor Speedway.
I don't know.
Please don't park on our front straight. It's not very wide to begin with.
We don't mind a bit of tape on our track.
No, they put a sign up saying reserved parking. Josh
have
Williams on the start line.
On the start line. That's very
my
good.
gosh.
Do you know what? I rather like that. I rather liked that.
And of course, this week's NASCAR is at COTA, and we get to see
Yay!
Kimi Räikkönen and Jenson Button.
Yes, and Connor Daly and Jordan Taylor. Jordan Taylor
Yes,
making
of
his
course.
NASCAR debut for Team Hendricks, filling in for Chase Elliott. He'll be driving the 9. I'm reliably informed by a very good source.
Or he turned
that-
some laps.
Yep. He's going to have a special tribute helmet, so we have to keep an eye on social media for that. But beyond the Cup Series, we've got an Xfinity Parker Chase in a Ford, Sage Karam in a Chevy, Parker Kligerman making his return to the series in a Chevy, Preston Pardis, the guy that we've enjoyed watching in Spec Miatas in a Chevy, and Cameron Lawrence in a Chevy. And then in trucks, Mason Filippi is going to be in a Ford. So lots of sports car greatness over the course of the weekend. The Xfinity and trucks race take place on Saturday, 1:30 Eastern Time and 5 o'clock Eastern Time for those two. And then Sunday at 3:30 is the Cup race.
And Jordan's already turned some laps, but not in what one would say was a Cup car. He's turned it in the Camaro 56. He's been doing some laps around the full circuit.
He tested in the Cup car at COTA the week before Sebring happened, so he has had laps too.
He was in the Camaro yesterday, I think,
Oh, jeez.
doing some testing. Obviously, it's not the same car. The key thing about this year is they're running the full track, aren't they?
Yes.
Yeah, not the shortened version that they've run in the past. I'm interested to see that. We're working at the weekend, but I might have to catch up on that. In some way, shape or form. All right, 16 minutes left before our MotoGP preview, which is going to be very interesting. Nick Damon will be talking a lot because I have to say now I have not done my due diligence on that. Where do you want to go with Shane next, Tim?
Well, I'd like to talk about what happened last weekend, which obviously was the Sebring 8 hours and 19 minutes, once you take away all the yellows.
Hey, the yellows count. Races are won and lost under yellow, as we saw.
How many laps did they do in the 8 hours and...
They did 69 laps of yellow during the Sebring 12-hour, which was 31 more than last year. I know that.
Yeah. What was the? You'll have the result there, Tim. How many laps did the winners do then in that 8 hours and?
No, I've no idea. I don't know the result. Has the result actually been confirmed, Shay?
Yes, it was made official earlier on today. I can tell you, John, in just a moment. The leaders did 322 laps.
Okay. So that was that wasn't a million miles away
No.
to what the WEC did in their 8 hours.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't too far off. And in a similar amount of time, but of course you're still circulating behind the safety car, so you...
Oh no, I'm talking complete nonsense. And we've just lost you for some reason there. I'm talking complete nonsense because WEC did 890 miles, and that would have been 1,207 miles. So that was interesting. Shea seem to have lost you. So we'll see if we can reconnect. Carry on, Tim.
I was going to let Shay carry this bit. It wasn't just 12 hours, though. There was Michelin Pilot Challenge, which I'm sure I know Shay wants to talk about that. We also had the first 2 rounds of the Porsches as well, didn't we?
And she's back.
She's back.
Yay!
Yes, we had the 2 opening rounds of the Porsche Deluxe Carrera Cup North America, who apparently decided, Chair, that they would run a Mazda MX-5 race instead.
Is that what happened out there?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. I did notice, though, that after the weekend, a full sweep, maximum points for Riley Dickinson.
Yeah,
He
was
scored.
class.
He did everything. He was in a class of his own. But unfortunately for him, the last time that somebody won everything, every point possible, that was Kai Van Berlo last year, did not go on to win the championship. So that doesn't mean it's over just because he cleaned up on the first weekend.
No, any non-finish in a championship that's going to be that close. Behind him, there was all kinds of stuff going on in both the races. They are both up on the IMSA channel and on the new Porsche Carrera Cup.us site as well, which is the place to go for all of that. Let's move on to Michelin Pilot Challenge, which was that seemed to be a demolition derby at one stage that they decided to have. Yeah. I don't even know what was going on there.
It wasn't pretty. The end of the race, if you take the last 30 minutes in isolation, that was pretty. That was really good racing out there. But we did have a change to the results after the fact because Random Vandals Racing, who made their debut this weekend in the championship for what should be a full season effort for Kenton Cook and Paul Sparta, missed minimum drive time. Paul Sparta, 8 seconds short. So that car was disqualified and moved to the back of the grid. And I just wanted to
Did they get to keep the watches and the trophy? Oh, no, hang on. That was something.
No, they weren't in a good position anyway at the end of the race. So it's not, in effect, that much of a penalty. It's more of a, guys, come on. Let's try and do better than this.
It's going to reignite that debate, though, isn't it? For 8 seconds on drive time, which, you know,
always will.
It depends whether you take the time coming into the pits or going out the pits.
But time doesn't matter. When you're in the pits, time is frozen.
Well, you know.
So he pitted 8 seconds too soon, which was the problem, basically. And they did squeeze him in very, very obviously as close as they could. But I was wondering why they had pitted at that point in any case in the race. Big shout out to the Alpha crew. They got that new Alpha because theirs was destroyed at Daytona with the crash with Roy Block.
Yeah.
They got that car about 3 weeks ago from now. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they were able to build it up, bring it to Sebring of all places, run competitively and win the race, hats off to the KMW team.
No, I know that's a fan favourite because that car's just a little bit different. The Giulietta, lovely little piece of kit. Let's move on to the. I'll tell you what. We'll do it chronologically, and bring Bradders back in as well for the FIA WEC 890, which is what it was. Ran to the full 8 hours. The big story, of course, was Antonio Fuoco qualifying on pole position. I'm not sure whether it was a collective. It had been collectively decided to look uber disappointed by the Toyota Gazoo Racing team, but they actually did look really disappointed that they hadn't got the pole position. Not to say a little bit shocked at the one lap pace, at least, of that Ferrari 499p.
They were definitely surprised, weren't they? You could see that was quite discernible on their faces in the pit lane. And you know what? We all thought that, this is whoever's writing this script needs a pat on the back, because to have a Ferrari on pole for the new era, that was a piece of history what we saw there. And it was undoubted that the car had the pace over the lap. That was never in doubt. However, just to spoil the party a little bit, when we were deliberating overnight going into the race day, it was like, brand new car, whether or not it can hold on to the lead and be at the front. And then there was that quite strange taking it out of track position with a strange pit stop.
There was a couple of things for the Ferrari. Ultimately, the times across all of the top category cars were actually in the race for much of a muchness, apart actually from the Toyota that finished second, who was about 3/4 of a second or a second quicker than everybody else, including its teammate, on a race fastest lap. The average laps over the stints were very, very close indeed. Ferrari shot themselves in the foot. I don't know if it's part of the cost cap.
Aren't they?
Well, I don't know if it's part of the cost cap and the personnel sharing. They brought the strategists over from Formula One.
That was my line, I thought.
into the sports car team. But pitting on that and giving up track position in that early yellow when we had the GT Ferrari on its roof. Fortunately, everyone...
3 laps in.
Yeah, 3 laps in, absolutely. I'm not sure... I didn't understand that, and I still haven't worked out why that was going to work for them. However, it was made even worse by the fact that Antonio Fuoco, new to the championship, overtook on the restart before the control line when he was coming back the green, which would have been fine in IMSA, but not in WEC. Subsequently, they got another drive-through as well, which I can't remember what that was for.
Speeding in the pit lane.
Oh, yes, speeding in the pit lane, thank you.
When he was taking the first penalty.
The worst part about that was that dropped him a lap. And it dropped him a lap because he was trying to catch up in the first place. And then he had to come back in again and do another drive-through, which dropped them the better part of another lap. They ended up 2 laps down. Now, people could rightly say, but Toyota were cruising at the end. Maybe they were, maybe they weren't. But, and we don't know how much they've got left. But Ferrari, even in race trim, when people just say they finished 2 laps down, they were soundly beaten by Toyota. That's not the case. You have to look at when those penalties occurred and what that did again for his track position and how those 2 laps were lost.
Yeah, I mean, they weren't beaten on performance, on outright performance, for sure. But that's what we mean by whether they're going to be around for the whole 8 hours. And that's what we mean by the team finding their feet with regards to getting to know the race regulations, the drivers getting to know the race regulations, and that sort of thing there, right there, what you just described of overtaking before the line. That's something you'll never, ever do again.
In WEC, you cannot afford to do that because there's no... Other than at Le Mans, where I think there will be waiver rounds this year for some of the teams, there's no waiver rounds. You don't get laps back. So you lose a lap. The cars are so closely matched. You might get a second or 2 seconds or 3 seconds or maybe even 6 seconds in a stint. In a stint of 31 laps, you might even get 10 seconds, but you're not getting a lap.
I was told on good authority that the Toyotas weren't hanging about. Those guys were told to race each other, and the term used was be sensible.
Well, that was quite clear when Brendan Hartley was on a slightly different strategy and he came up behind his teammate and he was on the radio asking to be by, and he was told, no, you have to get closer.
Yeah. And
he couldn't get close enough to get by.
Yeah.
And therefore they didn't swap over. Ultimately, that cost them the race. That cost Brendan's car the race. The other cars that were there, Shea and Joe were doing sterling work in the pit lane of the big manufacturers. I thought Cadillac share, obviously, Chip Ganassi Racing, I don't think they'll be too disappointed. There's still work to do. I thought coming into it that the Cadillac might be a better proposition on the bumps of Sebring, but they didn't quite have it at the weekend.
Yeah, I was a little surprised at that because of the strength of the Cadillacs that we saw in WeatherTech. But again, it's a good starting point. It's a team adapting to a new rule book, new championship and everything. And when you consider the amount of testing that Toyota has done at Sebring and the amount of testing that Ferrari did at Sebring, we know that they tested twice there at least. It's remarkable that Cadillac was able to stay as close as they did in the fourth position, and especially when considering that they were running different aero to the cars in WeatherTech.
I mean, so many stories in that WEC race that we haven't got time for, because I want to get to IMSA, but I do want to say Peugeot, Total Energy, they have the time, the logistics and the budget to fly a UK-registered car air freight across to Florida for Carlos Tavares to drive around in while he's there, who's their CEO, but they can't make a gearbox that works. That gearbox is made out of silly putty, I think, or at least the control systems are. There's talk of them ditching the concept. No cost cap here. They're talking about ditching the whole concept and going from an electrically operated gearbox to a pneumatic gearbox, which is a more conventional, traditional one. I suspect that Monsieur Jansoni is a little, as the French would say, à côté de la porte. I think he's probably moved a little bit closer to the door.
Utterly disappointing, weren't they? Utterly, for the race.
Cars look great.
The cars look great. I mean,
they rode the bumps well.
Which one of the drivers said that from inside the cockpit, the car feels just like a conventional car with a rear wing?
Yeah.
It's bound to be. You know, it's performing in the same way. It's getting the same downforce figures. But to be failing on something as fundamental as a gearbox, considering it's a year in, it ran last year. Those sort of reliability factors should be sorted by now.
Let's quickly move to IMSA. So much to talk about IMSA as well. I think we might have to do a little catch-up on next week's show, actually.
You're kidding. We're going to talk about IMSA in 4 minutes.
We have to, because we've got to go to Moto
Challenge
GP.
accepted.
We've got to squeeze IndyCar in as well.
Right.
No.
It did... Look, all of the safety cars were absolutely warranted because they were all incidents that required people to go out on the track or have people recovered. The old story about how long it takes, well, it takes as long as it takes, and it's a 3.75 mile lap, and that is a part of it. So we'll put that to one side for a moment. We'll talk about the end of the race in a moment, but first of all, class, quick breakdown from data share.
All right, so we have had 97 different drivers stand on the podium so far this year. Only 5 repeaters: Ben Barniket, Jack Hawksworth, Danny Juncadella, Jules Gagnon, and Mauro Engel. 28 different cars out of a possible 30, so very impressive performance in terms of diversity. As far as the win is concerned, it's Cadillac's 5th in the last 7 years, Porsche's 6th win in the pro category of the division of GTs. In the last decade, only Corvette and Porsche have won in pro, so that's interesting. BMW has now won every GTD race except Daytona, Indy, and Belle Isle. They have more wins than any other manufacturer in GTD. They were tied with Porsche on 18, but they are far ahead of Ferrari, Lambo, and Lexus, who are tied on 10 apiece. So now digging into the data by class. GTP, the most drive time was served by Felipe Nasr, who drove for 5 hours and 26 minutes. That is on-track time. The least, his teammate Michael Christensen. Fastest lap went to Renger van de Zande, but 15 of the 24 drivers were within a second. Sheldon van der Linde ripped out the second fastest lap, but all the other BMW drivers were at least 1.1 seconds off the pace, so clearly there's still work to do with that car. LMP2, most drive time went to Ed Jones, 5 hours and 29 minutes. The least, George Kurtz, 3 hours and 36 seconds, so perfectly maximizing minimum drive time for their weakest driver. Unfortunately, it didn't pay off, and they finished in the 5th position, but still. The fastest lap went to Christian Rasmussen, who drove 5 hours and 17 minutes, by the way. So he did a lion's share of the work, silver-rated driver. But in LMP2, only 8 of the 24 were within a second of one another. Ben Keating was the only bronze driver to be within 4 seconds of the fast lap time. So again, hats off to Ben Keating. In LMP3, the most drive time was one Matt Bell, the British variety, 5 hours and 12 minutes for him. His teammate car, the number 17, Anthony Mantella, had the least amount of drive time, 3 hours and 21 seconds. So AWA knocking it out of the park, getting their weakest driver out of the car as quickly as they could. Fastest lap went to Garrett Grist. The top 11 were within 3/4 of a second of one another, but 17 through 29 were more than 2 seconds off the pace. And the problem was Robert Mao, the gentleman driver in the Performance Tech car who caused so much strife and probably is not on Roger Penske's Christmas list anymore. He was 4 seconds off of his teammates' pace. Big questions around him. GTD Pro. The most drive time was Daniel Serra, 5 hours and 42 minutes and 47 seconds. That was almost half the race. The least amount of drive time went to his teammate, Casagrande. That was Gabriel. He struggled massively. He drove for 1 hour and 1 minute, but he was 1.1 seconds off of his teammate's pace. So Risi looked to their strength and had Regan and Serra drive a lot. Fastest lap went to Maro Engel. So for the second consecutive race, the 79 Mercedes was the fastest car. All 3 of their drivers were within the top 4 of the fastest drivers, and Corvette had all of their drivers within the top 9.
And
Lamborghini.
Just a quick note on Casagrande. The reason he was able to do that because they were in the GTD Pro class. If they'd been in the AM class, he'd have had to do 3 hours.
Yep, correct. And that was minimum drive time of 1 hour, so they beat that by 1 minute and 59 seconds.
Sorry, I thought it was worth pointing that out. Go on, carry on.
That is. Thank you. I'm going as fast as I can. I'm trying to get you off to your MotoGP show.
It's all right.
Lamborghini and BMW are still off the pace. As far as the fast laps were concerned, Lamborghini was 14th, 16th, and 22nd. BMW was 19th, 23rd, and 24th. And 23 of the 24 drivers were within 1.6 seconds of the fast lap time. So the team is still very close together. As far as the manufacturer's performance is concerned, again, GTD Pro, Mercedes has the best average finish, closely followed by Lexus, closely followed by Porsche, closely followed by Chevy, closely followed by Lamborghini. There's a bit of a gap back to Aston Martin, BMW, and Ferrari. And as far as the fast laps are concerned, with 2 in a row, Mercedes has that locked up. But Chevy, Aston, and Lexus are not far off. So the BOP is definitely swinging in a right direction there. For GTD, the most drive time went the way of Madison Snow, 4 hours and 53 minutes for him. He was tired on Sunday. The least was Ian James, Heart of Racing, 3 hours and 50 seconds for Ian. So again, Heart of Racing nailed the drive time. But in my book, the award for the best drive time goes to the Iron Dames. They had it evenly split between all 3 of their drivers. Rahel Fry was in the car for 3 hours and 49 minutes. Sarah Bovey, 3 hours and 43 minutes. Michelle Gadding, 4 hours and 4 minutes. I really appreciate that. Yeah. Fastest lap was Grenier, Mick Grenier, in the Cawthorpe Mercedes. It was the fastest GT lap by 0.05 of a second. In third was his teammate Kenton Cook, who had a sterling performance. Fourth was Indy Donchi. Fifth was Seb Prio, so at least we did have a Porsche up there. But the top 19 drivers were within a second of each other. The top 48 drivers were within 2 seconds. Best average finish of the season so far going to McLaren with the double podium. BMW is now up in second. Aston and Lexus are very close behind in third. And Mercedes, shockingly, with the worst average finish of any team in GTD because their lack of being able to finish the race as opposed to starting it well. Yeah. And in GT, as a class overall, last thing I promise, we had 34 drivers within a second of one another, 71 within 2 seconds. 6 out of 9 of the fastest drivers of the race, as far as GT is concerned, from both classes, belong to the Mercedes household. Both Sebring and Daytona, we have Corvette, Mercedes, Aston, and Lexus as the top manufacturers with time off pace, place in class, and overall ranking for single lap pace. But Porsche vaulted from last to 5th. Acura dropped from 6th to last, and Lamborghini is now 2nd to last. So there is still a little bit of work that needs to be done to try and bring those manufacturers back into the fold. because we still do have discrepancy. But the interesting thing is that just because you're fast doesn't mean you finish well and get the points at the end of the day.
They put the 5 mil back on the Porsche restrictor that they'd taken off at Daytona, which got them back in the game. Sebring, it has to be said, is somewhat of an outlier and can be very car specific. And for example, the Lexus has never gone particularly well there. I want to have a quick word, and I realise we're in overtime already. I want to have a quick word about the end of the race and the end of the race incident. A number of people have tweeted in, and I'm not saying whether I agree with this or not, but go back and watch the race and see how it develops. It's an interesting observation and comment. Dave, in particular, had tweeted and said, the end of the race was absolutely a function of increasingly more desperate manoeuvres by GTP drivers that weren't being penalised. I mean, certainly I remember the Wayne Taylor racing car at least twice forcing somebody off the track, and once actually redressing the balance themselves to make sure they didn't get penalised. But no penalties were forthcoming about that. Dave and a number of other people's submission and I'll take both of your thoughts on this because you were there and you were in the pits, is that when that happens, everybody else gets frustrated and therefore thinks that they have to get even more aggressive in defence when they're seeing aggression in attack not being penalised, including literally pushing people off the road for the lead of the tracks, for the lead of the race. So an incident, whether you call it a racing incident, whether you call it over-aggressive, whether you call it not looking far enough ahead, like the one we saw at the end. Now, forget the aftermath of it and how much carnage it caused. Just the actual incident of people squeezing each other and getting very, very close to each other in traffic. That was ultimately, says Dave and one or two other people, always going to happen because everybody had to up the ante. Joe?
I've spoken to a lot of people, and I've had at least 6 drivers blamed. There was only 3 drivers involved in the incident.
Yeah.
It was, for me, it was a racing incident. You've got the hottest drivers in sports cars. These cars are very heavy. They're very hard. We're getting towards the final sections of the race. Jaminet knew he had to keep Albuquerque back. Albuquerque knew he had to get ahead of Jaminet. Jaminet's focus, for me, was on the cars in front. He was looking towards how he was going to get by these and hopefully have Albuquerque held up by the slower traffic in the slower class. And so he was focusing ahead. People have said, well, he didn't see him in his mirrors, probably because he didn't look in his mirrors. He had lots going on. He had 2 GT cars, was it, or 3? So he's kind of moving around. You
can't see which side headlights are behind you either.
No, absolutely. It's just glare.
Correct.
So he's moving around to make the best move, thinking if I can get past these GT cars, I can keep Albuquerque, who is Philippe Albuquerque after all, and he had to do it. Albuquerque, meanwhile, is thinking, I have to get past Jaminet, and I'm going to make him trip up over these GT cars. And that is a recipe for the disaster we saw.
The Acura had straight line pace in its pocket. The other thing is, should Albuquerque have waited? There was time left in the race. Look, as far as I'm concerned, I don't blame either driver. I just robbed us of a great finish, unfortunately. But Shea, how did you see that? And particularly, as Dave and the other correspondents were saying, how it developed through the latter third of the race, with all of the incidents before it not being penalised or not even any warnings given out.
No, and to be honest, it had been building for a long time. I was surprised when it happened, but I wasn't surprised that it happened. Yeah. I was surprised who was involved with it, for sure, because that's not the kind of driving incident that you expect from Mathieu Jaminet or Philippe Albuquerque.
Totally
so
agree.
for both of those protagonists, I was gutted. For Acura, looking at potentially getting their first win at Sebring. For Penske, looking at getting potentially his first win at Sebring. Looking for Porsche to get potentially their first overall win at Sebring in 2 decades. It was a big build-up, but at the end of the day, the team that won the race was the one that faced adversity, kept fighting back, stayed strong, stayed calm, and did what they needed to win the 12 Hours of Sebring. The race chooses. I fully believe that, and it played out exactly how it was meant to.
I saw people on Monday night at the airport late on, and he still had a look of disbelief in his face. But my goodness, was he very, very happy? Both drivers, we should say, put it down to a racing incident. I think we'd be talking far less about it if there hadn't been so many other cars involved. If it had just been those two and they both ran on and then got back on and got back, I suspect we wouldn't have been talking about it so much.
I just want to say Jack Aitken said that he kind of was hanging back thinking exactly what happened was about to happen.
I'll have to pick my way through the debris.
Yeah, that's what he was kind of fingers crossed hoping for. I mean, at the end of the race, Nick Tandy, if you listen back to my interviews post-race at the podium, Nick Tandy did not want to talk to me. And I was looking him straight in the eye, and he was like, mate, I don't really want to talk to you. And I said...
Still third.
Yeah, I know, but, you're on the podium, and, all right, we're in the entertainment business, and racing's racing.
And just one point on that, because I know we have to move on. Everybody will be talking about it for a while. And I did say, look, this is Shades of 2007 all over again, but it was in a different class, obviously. We had that in a couple of other classes as well. Things were building towards the end of the races. They always seem to do. Few people asking why Scott McLaughlin was third, but the Porsche was still third in the points for GTP.
I can answer that.
You don't have to be running at the end. McLaughlin did go through and do the laps and finish third overall, and his team won in LMP2 share. But it is how far around the track that you get and who's crossed the line first, the last control line first, if you don't complete.
And who's further around the track in an accident.
Correct.
But the simple answer is, in IMSA, there is no overall podium. It is by classes. That's the way we do it. That's the way we've always done it.
Correct.
So the 6 Porsche, which wound up furthest down the racetrack, the furthest away from the start line, was credited with third place.
Yeah, exactly. And you do not have to be rolling at the end.
Nope.
Tim, you want to squeeze in a bit of Indy? I suspect we'll still be talking about that by the time we get to, I don't know, let's have a nice quiet race. Where shall we go to next? Oh, the streets of Long Beach.
I mean, it's as if we didn't have post-race tech, isn't it? I've just been looking at Twitter, and the second most...
Not everybody listens to post-race tech. Who's listening now?
The second most... it's available as a podcast. You should download it sometime. Michelin Post-Race Tech. Just search for it. Second most talked about thing on Twitter at the moment seems to be Josh Williams. And the first most talked about thing on Twitter seems to be Nina Simone. So there's that. Gentleman and lady, what has IndyCar not done since 1971?
Oh. 71. Something to do with an oval track?
No, something to do with the country they've not raced in since 1971.
Oh, Argentina.
Argentina.
Yep.
And yet, if you follow the Twitter account of the local government of Santiago del Estero, which obviously you do.
Which you do.
You'll have seen yesterday a tweet showing photographs of Mark Miles walking around the Rio Termas circuit with Ricardo Juncos and Tony Cotman and Michael Mottry.
I also think... the IndyCar president tweeted it himself even before that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Haven't they done this before and it began to sort of implode?
I mean, Argentina's not really in a great place to be hosting international sporting events, given that inflation is currently 102.5%.
Oh, gosh. Well, and on behalf of my neighbors to the Great White North, can we please get another race in Canada before we look somewhere else? Because the Canadian IndyCar fans are some of the best in the world. And they deserve more than just the Toronto Indy. It's a great race, but they deserve one on the West Coast, too.
Mosport.
Edmonton.
Ooh.
But also Agustin Canapino, so,
Yeah, true.
Yeah, but Devlin DeFrancesco.
Yeah. A quick word about tomorrow night at 9 o'clock. Australian Grand Prix Corporation CEO Andrew Westicker drops in to On the Grid.
Big guest.
Yeah, very big. So that's just 1 week before Australia's largest sporting event in terms of motorsport this year. It's his last year at the helm of the Grand Prix, and he'll be talking about the challenges, the current year and the future after he's departed. Then the team will be talking all things F1, the fallout from Saudi with an Australian eye on that, plus a deep dive into the hots and nots from the week that was. That's Krilsey, Shebex and the rest of the team tomorrow night after Simcast on the grid at 9 o'clock. And that's about all we've got time for.
It is. But don't worry, because we'll be back in about 90 seconds' time with a MotoGP preview, so stay tuned.
Yeah, without Shea and Joe. Joe's actually going to go to bed.
I am actually going to go to bed. Good night, everybody.
Good night, Joe.
Good night, Shay. Good night, John Boy. And, of course, Joe will be back with us at the weekend when we kick off on Friday with qualifying from Mugello for the Mugello 12 Hours. It's a double six, so it's Saturday and Sunday. Nick Damon and Ben Constantinos joining me and Joe for that. That's all we've got time for tonight. There's no time to explain the llama. He's on two wheels next.
This program is a Radio Show Limited production. For more, subscribe to Midweek Motorsport wherever you get your podcasts.